I'm glad you guys are here. The purpose of today is actually to review, good morning, everyone, to review the purchase contract. And, you know, December of this year, it's going to be, see it. Can you guys all hear me okay? I keep getting these weird messages about my microphone.
The video went away.
The video went away and it's garbled.
Okay, what did we do, Dave? This is, I'll be glad when we're done with, well, we'll never be done with
Never
Zoom,
be
but-
done with Zoom.
Yeah,
Zoom
but
here, stuff.
it just makes it so hard to do these sometimes. All right, let's see. There's my face. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Thank you. Can you see us now?
No.
How many fingers am I holding up?
Okay.
Yes, video is on.
There we are. Thank you.
Yay. All right. So let's try this again. Did you get a handout? I have handouts right here for anyone who needs one. Here we are. There you go. And David Mercer. And Missy. All right. Okay. All right. So we're going to get started now. Thanks for your patience with our technical difficulties. I don't know if it starts becoming garbled, or if you can't see, or if there's any issues, please unmute yourself and let me know before we go too long, because I want to make sure that everybody can hear and we can all participate. This is one of those things that we're going to talk about it. I really want everybody to feel good and understand what's going on with this purchase contract. Because the truth of the matter, the person who knows this contract best is in a better negotiating stance, right? If you know what the law says, if you know what the, you know, the statutory disclosure rules are, if you know what the transaction's all about, you're going to be in a better position. Good morning.
How are you?
There's a couple handouts right there.
Okay.
And then find a seat and make yourself comfortable. We're just now getting started. Oh, perfect timing. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen. I want you to peek. I'm going to give you just a peek preview of the purchase contract that's going to be revised December of this year. I'm not using this contract because, truthfully, it's not done yet. It's just they're in a revision mode, so to speak. And they'll be making a few more revisions before the end of the year. I just want you to get an idea of it. So let me share my screen for a minute. And let's go down here. Where's my files? Here. And we're gonna do this one and this one. And let me open them. Okay, so this one right here, this is what the purchase contract is going to look like in December of this year. And there's going to be upcoming trainings and whatnot on it, but you can see it's as we scroll down, paragraph 3, what it did is it brought pretty much all the due dates, all the contract dates, when everything is coming up in one spot. So you can see here, if you take a peek, of what it's going to look like. Everything in red is what they've added. Anything in blue is revisions. But these are the first few pages of the contract. You can see how totally different it looks, right? 16 pages? Yeah. They added a couple more pages. You know, it's insane, isn't it? It's crazy. It's like seller advisory. It just doesn't stop.
Gina, is this on our zip forms already?
Not yet.
Okay.
Is that, I always try to do a
Yes.
so that they can read it. so when you're adding pages, all it does is cloud it additionally for them. And then you can ask them, okay, do you have any, oh, no. And then, just.
So I'm really glad you brought that up. And for those of you who can't hear Maria, what she was saying is she normally tries to give her client a copy of the purchase agreement beforehand so they can go through and read it before she sends it to sign, which is excellent practice. And every one of us should be doing that before we get our clients to sign it. If they're not going to read it, they can't come back and say, I didn't know that because you sent it ahead of time. But what we're going to discuss is some of the important features of the contract so that when you're emailing that contract to the buyer to review it before they sign it, maybe in your email, you can point out just a few of the highlights that you really need to understand this. Please read the contract, especially, take note of these sections. So they feel confident and they understand what the timelines are and what they're going to be doing. But yeah, the new one is 16 pages here. You can see there's tons of revisions and updates. Some of them are actually very good. And some of them, it's like, I don't know why they bothered, but it is what it is. But we're going to go down here. They cleaned up a little bit, removal of contingencies. They cleaned up home automation, et cetera, et cetera. So here it is. I also like they've cleaned up, my mouse is going crazy. They've also changed the contract. So instead of, possession, it now will say upon recording, which that's what it should say instead, because agents really want to put in a time there and you shouldn't. So we're going to cover all that, but I just wanted to kind of give you an eyeball and let you see what to expect. All right, so with that said, let's get out of there. And we are going to go into the purchase agreement. And this is the purchase agreement that we have today. And if did you get a copy? Oh, yeah. I have handouts here for everyone. And then you're welcome. And those of you on Zoom, it's on the screen. And so, of course, everything starts with agency. When you pull up the residential purchase agreement, these documents are automatically going to pull up with it. This is what comes up when you pull in the RPA. So remember agency, there's three elements of agency. One is disclose, the second is to elect, and the third is to confirm, and all three are incredibly important. So this form, this is the disclosure portion of it, saying here's what our duties are, right? If I represent a seller, if I represent a buyer, and when we represent both the buyer and the seller. So by your client signing this, they're right here, you can see, and anytime you see something in bold, that's a really important feature of the contract. So you want to make sure that people understand it. Good morning, George. So by the client signing this, they're acknowledging receipt of a copy of the disclosure and the portions of the civil code provided on page 2. So page 2, this should explain to you how important agency is. Page 2 is all about civil code section 2079.13, and it's all about agency. So if anybody has any questions, this is what your job is. This is what your job description is. This is just, this is a sample of the purchase contract. That's why it says do not complete sample only. It's because it's telling you when you go do the purchase contract, you're going to have to complete that. That's the third element of confirmation. Okay. And so they just signed page 1 and we move on. The fair housing form is the second page that pulls up. There's really nothing you need to do about that. The third is the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure and consent. And I just want to point out one thing on this form here, because I hear this all the time. Can I tell the buyers about other offers, right? And if you look right here on the PRBS, offers not necessarily confidential. Buyers advise that the seller or listing agent may disclose the existence, terms, or condition of buyer's offer, and unless all parties and their agents have signed a written confidentiality agreement. So it's between you and your client. You're going to discuss the best course of action for you. If somebody calls and says, what is your highest offer? based on your conversation with your seller, because it says right here, it goes on to say, whether any such information is actually disclosed depends on many factors, such as current market conditions, the prevailing practice in the real estate community, the listing agent's marketing strategy, and the instructions of the seller. So let's say you've got a property at $500,000 and you have 3 offers, one at $450, one at $460, and one at $470. And somebody says, what's your highest offer? It is not really in your client's best interest to say 470, right? So, because they're gonna come in at 475 and it's listed at 500, so you just dogged your client. So what you might wanna come back as, you're gonna have to bring your strongest offer, right? Bring your strongest offer. You're not disclosing what it is, but you're saying bring your strongest offer. But let's say you have 3 offers, one at 5, one at 510, and one at 520, okay? Then you can say you're gonna have to come in stronger than 520. And I mean, just talk to your client about it and get your strategy together. But really what I want you to remember out of this class today is I want you to think. I want you to think, what does this mean? How will it be perceived when I present it to the seller or to the buyer's agent, right? So I really, really think a lot of times we get in such a hurry, and because we don't know what the contract says, first thing you want to do is just ask, so what do I need to do? And what I want you to do is stop, and I want you to think, because I'd really rather you come to me and say, okay, so here's my scenario. Here's what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think? Right? That way I know you've read the contract, you know what's going on, you have some strategies in place. And have I experienced anything else that might be able to add to that? Right? So really, really go through and think about it. So the next is the wire fraud, and we all know how to talk about that. Really, the wire fraud, because that's, oh my gosh, how much? What was the last number I heard? It was like $62 billion was defrauded in wire fraud last year. The year 2019. It's a huge amount, and it's only getting worse. And so just remember this: when you're opening escrow, you're going to get business card, or you write down the telephone number and the name of the escrow officer, and you give it to your client. And then you say, when you get to the bank to wire the money, or before you wire the money, I want you to call this phone number, not the phone number you received in the email, right? Because what hackers do is they intercept emails, they change the PDF with their account number information, and for any questions, contact this number, and they've got their number. So when you call, they're gonna say, oh yeah, that's the right account number. So we don't want them to do that. We want the buyer to call the number that we gave them, so they can verify, is this the right number? Literally, this happened over the last year. I don't exactly remember what month it was, but with an agent, and they did call to confirm, and it was a wrong account number. So that email was intercepted. So it's really important practice. You let your client know, we're going to keep you as safe as humanly possible, but you need to follow these rules, okay? And then get that money wired in. Okay, so that's the wire fraud. And then here is what I like to call the beast. Because that's exactly what it is. So remember, on a purchase contract, it is accepted when it's been signed by the seller and delivered to the buyer or the buyer's agent, right? So when we're thinking about acceptance, and we're going to get to paragraph 31 of this contract, that's the expiration of offer, that's where your name needs to go. So when the seller signs it, and if you're representing the buyer and they send it back to you, now you're authorized to receive it on behalf of the buyer. If you neglected to put your name on that paragraph 31, now you have to get it to the buyer before it's an accepted transaction. Just because you get it, if your name isn't there, does not mean it's an accepted transaction, because it's important, that delivery to the buyer. Okay. All right, so at the very top, you've got the date prepared. That's the date you're preparing it. But the importance of this date is this is the date that will be referred to through the entire transaction. So on any addendum, you'll see any addendum or any counter or any other document that refers to the purchase agreement. It's going to show this is an addendum to the purchase agreement dated, and it's this date right there that you're going to refer back to on everything throughout the transaction. So if you're representing a buyer and you think, well, I'm gonna meet him next week, I'll just prepare it today. You probably want to date it the day you're actually meeting with the buyer. Otherwise, it looks like you prepared, that contract was done a week earlier than it really was. Okay. So paragraph 1, this is an offer from. Obviously, you're going to put your buyer's name in there, the real property address, the purchase price, close of escrow. Please, here's another part. Remember, today's theme is think. Please think about it. Because when there's a holiday, it can really mess things up, right? For example, if you had a contract to close in 30 days, and 30 days fell on July 2nd, or what was Saturday, July 3rd? Yeah, July 3rd. That buyer's gonna think, cool, I get to move in on 4th of July weekend. And technically, they're not gonna close on the 3rd because the 3rd's a Saturday. They're not gonna close on the 4th. They're not even gonna close on the 5th, right? Because the 5th was a holiday. They're gonna close sometime on the 6th. So they might be sitting in front of the house with their trailer, which this has happened in the past, thinking, I'm closing on this day, and they're really not closing until later. So look at the calendar, see when is this date going to, really happen? If you're not sure, maybe there's going to be a couple of counters going back and forth and you're not sure how to handle it, give yourself a couple extra days or move it out so it's not landing at least on a Saturday or Sunday. Does that make sense? So think about that. And then paragraph 2, agency. Disclose, elect, confirm. So you disclosed it already. The election is when your client says, yes, I want you to represent me in this transaction. And then the confirmation is right here. And so please do not be a lazy agent. You can get this information right off of the MLS. If you don't know who the listing agent is, look on the MLS, right? It's right there. If you don't know their broker information, look on the MLS. And remember, for example, Berkshire Hathaway, our legal name is not Berkshire Hathaway. That's Warren Buffett's legal name. Our legal name is Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, California Properties. But sometimes I hear agents, that's so long, and they want to just put in Berkshire Hathaway. Please don't do that. Please put in Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, California Properties. You can abbreviate California to CA, and that at least shortens that up. And then make sure the license numbers are in there. Again, you can find that on the MLS. And the most important thing, because I see this missed all the time, you've got to check these boxes, okay? If those boxes aren't checked, it doesn't apply. And so you want to make sure that those boxes are checked. So confirmation is important. It's telling escrow, it's confirming with all parties who represents whom, okay? Of course, C is again, potentially competing buyers and sellers. That is explained in the PRBS, which was part of this contract. And now we're going to go into the finance terms. And again, this is an area where you really need to think about what you're doing. So the initial deposit is going to be anywhere from 1 to 3% of the purchase price is the norm, okay? If I'm a listing agent, I'm going to ask for 3%, period. So talk to your buyer and let them know it's 1 to 3%. 3% is because of liquidated damages. That's the maximum amount that a buyer can get is liquidated damages, under liquidated damages. So let your buyer know, hey, are you prepared to make a 3% deposit? Especially in a market like today, you have to come in strong. And if you're doing a mealy, $1,000, they're going to laugh at you. They're going to laugh at you. So calculate it out, and that goes right there. Increased deposit, we really don't do too much, but let me give you an example of where you might need that. So the increased deposit might be, hey, I'm pulling some money out of a 401k. I've got $10,000 now I can give for my initial deposit. And it's gonna take about 7 days for me to get my money out of my 401k. And I'd like to, to put an additional deposit then. That's what this paragraph is for. But you won't need to use it unless there's a reason or whatnot on that. Of course, if it's all cash, no loan is needed to purchase the property. This offer is not contingent upon the buyer obtaining a loan. Written verification of sufficient funds to close this transaction is attached to this offer. Or buyer shall within 3 days or whatever, how many days, deliver to seller such verification. Today's market, it must be attached. So you want to coach your client and let them know, hey, we need to give proof of funds. And so what does that mean? That means either a bank statement and we'll black out account numbers, or there's many people, depending on what price point you're in, they're not going to give you their bank information, right? So they're going to contact their bank and just get a letter from their banker saying they are financially qualified to close for a $1 million property. Something legal from the bank that you can show, I have funds to close this escrow. Okay. In the loan section, this is really important, guys. Understand everything that's put in this contract becomes part of the agreement. So if your buyer is getting a loan, it defaults to conventional, or you'll check the box if it's FHA or VA, and you're going to put in the first loan amount. I hear too many times, well, I don't know what it is. What should I do? And my answer is, call the lender. Yes, call the lender. When you're representing a buyer, that lender is your best friend. You are going to be working together almost daily to make sure your client has gotten the documents to the lender. Is everything going smoothly? Has the appraisal been set? What's outstanding? You're constantly on top of it. So I would get on the phone with the lender and say, hey, what's the loan? Where are we? What is the interest rate? Because in this right here, it says the loan will be conventional financing, FHA, VA, seller financing. We've seen a few of those recently. Assume blah, blah, blah. The loan shall be at a fixed rate not to exceed blank percent. Okay. So what does that mean to your buyer? It means, let's say the lender says they're going to get a loan for X dollars at 3.5%. Okay. If you don't put in 3.5% here, what you've done is you've just locked your buyer into getting any loan they can possibly get. Does that make sense? But if you put 3.5% in there, and now something happens, there's a crazy world we're in today, and interest rates shoot up to 4%. And that might kick that monthly payment higher than what the buyer can afford or the buyer is comfortable paying, right? So now that's a contingency. So if the interest rates go over that 3.5% and the buyer says, whoa, I'm not comfortable. This is my monthly payments are going to be a lot more than what I thought they were going to be. Now you have an out on the contract. Okay. So that's why that is so super important. Make sure you don't leave that blank. Always put something in there. If you're not sure, call the lender and say, how is this buyer? What can he do? What can we do? Second loans in 17 years, I've not had to deal with that.
However, see, if we put an interest rate there, normally our offers don't get accepted within 2 or 3 days. When the lender pre-qualifies them at this interest rate that we're entering, after 3 days, the interest rate is going to be different. Might be higher, it might be lower, but if we are entering an interest rate in there, then.
Well, that's why you talk to the lender when you're writing the offer and say, what not to exceed. So it might be currently at 3.5 and maybe it goes to 3.6 and your client is still good with that. But we got to put some kind of ceiling on it because again, nobody predicted the crash in 2008, right? But it happened and things went crazy. So this protects your buyer. So put 4%, put 4.5%, put whatever that lender says, this is the max they're gonna be able to qualify for. Okay, that way they have an out if they need to,
I have
Michael,
a question.
Uh-huh.
When the loan officer lender says to me, oh, I've locked them in at this percentage,
Mhm.
what do they do to lock someone in? Do they just put it in writing or?
you know, that's a lending question, but it just, it's like a fixed rate, so to speak. So for the next X amount of days, that buyer is guaranteed that rate regardless if it goes up. So if the interest rates go up to 4% and they're locked in at 3.5, they're locked in at 3.5. They don't have to worry.
What is a lock-in?
What do you mean, what is the lock-in?
I mean, who do they have to lock it in with?
Yeah,
What is that?
whoever's giving the money.
Okay, just.
It's
just
the
a
lender.
Verbal,
The-
it's a written order.
This is a lender thing. Don't worry about that. That's not, this is what your lender is going to be doing. And I'm not into lending, so, but it's whatever they do to lock in the loan with the investors who are giving the money. Okay, that's kind of how I look at it. Okay, good questions. Any other questions? And then FHA or VA, tough market today for FHA and VA, and my heart goes out for them. But if they're getting an FHA or VA, understand, buyer has 17 days to deliver seller written notice, that's the CAR form FVA, of any lender required repairs or costs that buyer requests seller to pay for or otherwise correct. Seller has no obligation to pay or satisfy lender requirements unless agreed in writing. And then the FHA VA amendatory clause shall be part of the agreement. So what does that mean? In any traditional transaction, the buyer makes has their home inspection. The home inspection outlines 4 million things that is wrong and could go wrong in the foreseeable future. And then the buyer does a repair request to the seller. Then the seller gets a chance to look at it and say, yes, I'll do it. No, I'm not gonna do it. I'll do this, but I'm not doing this. Or here, how about I could just throw some money and you guys go away, right? So those are really the options. But on an FHA loan, for example, there are some health and safety issues that are lender required repairs. That should not be on a repair request. That needs to go on the CAR form FVA, okay? Because at the top of the FVA, in big bold letters, it says, seller, if you don't do these, the loan will not be approved. It's cut and dry. There's no, second guessing about it. So you will have potentially either 2 repair requests, so to speak. 1 request for repairs for all the other stuff and 1 FVA for the lender required. And then the seller will make a decision what they're going to do or not do. Okay.
Repeat that again, I'm sorry. I have 2. I've done.
So technically you have like 2, let that in here. You have 2, so to speak, repair requests to the seller. One is the regular request for repairs, and the other is the FVA. Those are the lender required repairs. And because at the top of that form, it says, hey, seller, if you do not do these repairs, the loan will not fund. So then the seller has to make a decision. Look, this is a big deal. If I say no, this deal falls out, which the seller's within their rights to do, right? They can do whatever they want at that point. But it does put them on notice. It's a higher level, and this is a deal breaker. Okay.
But that's only on an FHA or VA.
Yeah.
Is there any counterpart on a conventional loan?
No.
Okay.
No. Good question. Thank you. Okay. So that's the financing part. Take that seriously because that's really important for your buyer. And then additional financing terms, that's going to be, again, not in today's market, but in as things in a more neutral market, we can say, some buyers would like to ask seller to pay for closing costs, right? So that might be where you would put seller to pay up to 3% of purchase price toward buyer closing costs. That might be, let's say they're going to pay cash for this property, okay? And there's a handout right there, like, let's say they're going to pay cash for this property, but the cash is coming from either stocks or a 401k. right? Again, let's think about this for a second. They have all this money in this bank account. So they say, yeah, I'm gonna pay cash for this house. I'm just gonna request the money to come out now of my 401k. So they do that, you put all cash offer, and the offer is accepted, and the next day the market crashes, and their 401k just lost 50% of, and if you think, oh, that will never happen, it's already happened once, right? So we've learned lessons on how to protect people through these different things. So you might want to put on here contingent upon funds being received from buyer's 401k. That way, should something happen, I mean, there was a time I thought I was going to be writing a check to my 401k. It got so bad there, right? Because everybody just lost so much money during the crash. So you might, if it's coming from, if they don't have the cold hard cash in their bank account, they're getting it from another thing, you may want to think about putting a contingency on that just in case something happens between now and then. Josie?
Okay, so you will mark a letter C, but what were you put the?
On paragraph E. And where it says additional financing terms? Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And then balance of down payment. The good news is zip forms automatically calculates everything for you, so you're not required to do math. Right? And so you don't have to worry about that. And then it'll calculate the purchase price total. Okay. Any questions on page 1? Pretty simple so far, right? Okay, verification of down payment and closing costs. Okay, I'm gonna switch gears here and change glasses. So I can move. Okay, so verification of down payment and closing costs. Buyer or buyer's lender or loan broker pursuant to paragraph 3 shall within 3 days after acceptance deliver to seller written verification of buyer's down payment and closing costs, or you're going to check the box verification attached. So again, today's market, just get this all up front as soon as humanly possible, because there's not a seller on the planet that's going to accept an offer that doesn't have proof of funds or verification. Okay. Appraisal contingency and removal. This agreement is, or if the box is checked, is not contingent upon a written appraisal of the property. Buyer shall remove the appraisal contingency or cancel this agreement within 17 days after acceptance. So again, we are in a unique time. Many buyers are waiving the appraisal. So what does that mean to your buyer? It means if they're getting a loan, you need to talk to the lender. Again, all conversations start with the lender. If there's a lender involved, you have to get on the phone with that lender. Some agents are even asking for backups by lenders. If we get an approval letter from someone we've never heard of, it is really good practice for you, if you're the listing agent, to counter saying, I want you to get a backup loan app done by whoever your favorite lender may be. That way you know that they're really, truly qualified. You don't want to have to deal with this 3 weeks into escrow, all right? It costs nothing, and it does not ding the buyer's credit, but it gives you and the seller some peace of mind that they really are approved. If they are approved and everything is good, check that box verification attached, or check that, is not contingent upon the appraisal if it's a cash offer. If it is a loan, again, talk to the lender and see, do they have cash on hand? Are they going to be able to waive it? What does that mean to them to come in with the difference, right? Because a lot of contracts we're saying buyers are going to come in with the difference. So if it doesn't appraise, they are aware of it and they cannot cancel for appraisal issues. Maria.
Yeah, just back to getting that second verification. So not necessarily need to put that into the listing, right? I mean, I would do that more on a case-by-case situation where then I would do that on an addendum. Let's say if I were coming back to.
You do it on a counter offer.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I meant, counter offer.
Yeah, and that's a conversation you have with the seller at the time you get the offer. Everybody's situation is different. If you didn't hear the question, If you didn't hear the question, it's, should that be in the listing or should it be on a case by case? And it's on a case by case. You know, once you get, if you're the listing agent, you get an offer in and you have no idea who the lender is, talk to the seller. I would definitely, no matter what, call the lender if I'm the listing agent and I get an offer in. I'm on the phone with that lender saying, hey, I'm the listing agent. Tell me about this buyer, you know, how, they are well qualified. Do you have all the docs or have you just had a telephone call with them? Because there's a big difference there, right? You can get pre-approved in a matter of seconds, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be qualified because, oh, you mean if I didn't work the last year, that's an issue, right? And so, you know, you really have to make sure all the ducks are in a row. And of course, talk to your buyer. If they're saying, sure, I'll remove the appraisal contingency, make sure they understand what that means. All right, it means if the house is 500 and it appraises at 475, they're buying the house at 500, right? And they have to make sure that the lender is good and they have enough funds coming in as a down payment that it's not going to affect the loan. Okay, next paragraph.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can't that get readjusted for some, I remember putting in an offer on a condo and the seller put in there that there was a $10,000, if there was a $10,000 difference between the appraisal and the selling price, that the seller was not gonna cover any of that difference. Does that happen?
That's meaning waiving the appraisal. Yeah, if I'm understanding you correctly, we're just saying that, no, the sellers are not gonna lower the price.
Right, but what happens if the appraisal doesn't come in as you said? Can the buyer request the price to be lowered to the appraisal price?
Okay, so if they do not waive the appraisal, if they say, no, it is contingent upon the appraisal, and the house is 500 and it comes in at 475, of course, the buyer can come back to the seller and say, I want to reduce the price to 475, which is exactly the reason why sellers today are pretty much demanding the appraisal contingency be removed because they don't want to lower the price, right? Not when they're getting multiple offers. Although things have slowed a little. Have you felt it?
Yeah.
Things are slowing. We're not seeing the multiple offers we saw last month. We're not seeing that kind of frenzy. So that is a really good thing. It means, you know, things are going to neutralize a little bit. We knew this would happen. And we also know that in the fall, there's going to be a lot more inventory, or more inventory at least. And there's going to be more options for buyers. So that's a really good thing too. So appraisals are, you know, you want, really, if I'm representing the buyer, I don't want my buyer to pay over market for the house. I don't want, you know, it's such a craziness out there. But if your buyer is insistent, saying, I have to have this house, right? And some buyers, they just are. If he's insistent or she's insistent on it, please make sure you're running the comps. You're having your buyer sign off that I've showed you these comps. You see they're at 200 a square foot and you're paying 275 a square foot, right? Have them sign off on the comps. Make sure they're also signing off on the market condition advisory, so they can't come back and say, well, I overpaid and it's all your fault. You owe me the other $25,000 because I would have never done that. So what you've done is you've just communicated. Communication is everything in this business. You've got to understand what this means, communicate to your client and say, here's where we are. How do you want to proceed? Comps, I'm signing off on the MCA. I'm going to waive the appraisal contingency. I've got money and I'll use it. Now you've done your job of explaining to them what it all meant and how you're going to move forward. Okay. But in any regular market, I'm going to say, you know, we need to keep it a contingent on the appraisal because you want to make sure you're not paying more for the house than what it's worth. Okay. Loan terms. So under the paragraph J, loan terms, you know, hopefully their loan is already in the process and they're not going to just start the loan application process afterwards, but that's what paragraph J1 is. And then loan contingency, buyers shall act diligently and in good faith to obtain the designated loans. Buyer's qualification for the loan specified above is a contingency of this agreement unless otherwise agreed in writing. If there is no appraisal contingency or the appraisal contingency has been waived or removed, then failure of the property to appraise at the purchase price does not entitle buyer to exercise the cancellation right pursuant to the loan contingency if buyer is otherwise qualified for the specified loan. Buyer's contractual obligations regarding deposit, balance of down payment, and closing costs are not contingencies of this agreement. So sometimes I'll ask an agent, so do you have any contingencies? No, there's no contingency. Is there a loan? Oh yeah, there's a loan. So then there's a contingency, right? All these pieces, I mean, think, again, I always like to use the elephant. You know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? This contract is the elephant, and there's so many little bites to it that, and ways that really protect the buyer, and that's a good thing. You know, it used to be caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. And that's not, since I think the 80s, 1986, that's not the way it is now. Now, the buyer has every right to do their due diligence and to have these contingencies to make sure that they want to move forward. Loan contingency removal within 21 days after acceptance, buyers shall remove the loan contingency or cancel this agreement. If there is an appraisal contingency, removal of the loan contingency shall not be deemed removal of the appraisal contingencies. Those are two separate contingencies. One is a loan, one is for the appraisal. No loan contingency, of course, if it's not, you know, sometimes people want to get a small loan just for tax purposes. You know, they got cash to close this property, but they say, you know, money's so cheap right now. It's like free money. I'm gonna put down 400,000 and I'm gonna get $100,000 loan, right? And they really want this house, so they say, I'm gonna check this box J4, no loan contingency, because if I don't get the loan for whatever reason, or if I don't like the terms, I'm just gonna pay cash for it. Wonderful, that's a good thing, and that's what that means.
I did have a client ask me, because he sold his house in Burbank for almost $1 million. And so that agent was trying to give him advice for the purchase he's gonna make out here. And they told him, don't pay cash for the house. Take out a loan, it's better for you.
So if you didn't hear that, he has a buyer in Burbank, sold a home. His out of area agent is telling him how to buy a house here in the desert. So I would personally just have a heart to heart with that client and let him know what it needs. Let him know the market, and I'd be very professional about it, but you know what? Out of area agents don't know our market. They just don't know our market out here. We live in a very different place. And so they want to come out here because who doesn't want to sell in the desert, right? But it's a very different market. So I would just approach it as, you know, here's what it means in today's market. If there, you know, if it's a property that's been on the market for a while and there's no other offers, and they fine. But you've got to look at each case. What is this property? If you're looking at a property that's got 6 offers on it, gee, do you really want to go in with a loan, or do you want to come in clean with cash? You know, so just let the buyer, here's your options. What do you want to do? And again, we're just facilitating a business transaction. So we just have to explain what everything means and let the buyer make that decision. Okay. Hey, buyer stated financing. We go through this a lot. Go down here just to, actually, I think I skipped lender limits on buyer credits. Let me start there. So lender limits on buyer credits. Any credit to buyer from any source for closing or other costs that is agreed to by the parties, contractual credit, shall be disclosed to buyer's lender. Not maybe, it shall, everything has to be disclosed to the buyer's lender. If the total credit allowed by buyer's lender, that's your lender allowable credit, is less than contractual credit, then the contractual credit shall be reduced to the lender allowable credit. And in the absence of a separate written agreement between the parties, there shall be no automatic adjustment to the purchase price to make up for the difference between the contractual credit and the lender allowable credit. So what does that mean? It means during the course of the transaction, maybe the buyer asked for closing costs, and the lender said, yeah, you can ask for closing costs. And then something happens and the seller says, you know what, I'm not going to do any repair. What if I give you $2,000? in lieu of repairs. The first thing you have to do is call the lender and say, hey, if the seller's willing to give, another $2,000 for credit, is that going to be an issue? And the buyer could come back and say, yeah, they're capped at 3,000 and now that brings them to 4. So you can only give up to $3,000 credit. I don't know the lending world. That's not my career. That's why I depend on the lenders. So it's important you talk to them because all loans are different. All buyers are different. If it's just because it works for one does not mean it's going to work for another. So again, just get on the phone with the buyer's lender and say, here's what they're doing. How do you feel about that? Have that conversation with them. But that's what that means is lender limits. You just can't give the buyer as much as the buyer wants without first getting approval from the lender. Okay? Now, buyer stated financing. This comes up a lot. Seller is relying on buyer's representation of the type of financing specified, including but not limited to all cash, amount of down payment, or contingent or non-contingent loan. Seller has agreed to a specific closing date, purchase price, and to sell to buyer in reliance on buyer's covenant concerning financing. Buyer shall pursue the financing specified in the agreement. Seller has no obligation to cooperate with buyer's efforts to obtain any financing other than that specified in the agreement, and the availability of such alternate financing does not excuse buyer from the obligation to purchase the property and close escrow as specified in this agreement. So what does that mean? It means we're in some multiple offer frenzy out there. Buyers are saying, I'm going to give cash, and to get their offer accepted, right? So they say it's a cash deal. Seller has three other offers and they're all financing. So they say, let's go with this cash deal. And then they open escrow. And then guess what happens? You get a call from the buyer's agent that says, my buyer is saying money's so cheap, they decided they're going to get a loan. Ooh, yeah, I know, because those dogs, they did that on purpose, didn't they?
Yeah.
So this paragraph basically says, you do whatever you want, but we're relying on what the contract says. If we're expecting you to close one way or another on this closing date as you specified in the contract. So if you want to get a loan, you can go, try to get your loan and do what you want to do, but on close of escrow date, that money has to be there, whether it be from a loan or to cash, but we're expecting you to have that money in there. That's what that paragraph is. It's to protect the seller from buyer doing that, right? So, and then that's not a contingency, remember? So now they say, okay, I'm going to get a loan. There's no 21-day contingency period. There's none of that anymore. We're looking at a cash transaction. You do what you want to do, but we're expecting you to close on this date with no loan contingency. Dave.
Why can't the contracts talk like you?
So, Gina, if the seller can't or the buyer can't perform based on that, then they're gonna relinquish their deposit. That's the bottom line.
Well, it's not contingent upon them getting a loan. If they wrote a cash offer,
Yeah.
and now they want to switch to a loan, unless they send an addendum or amendment to existing agreement that the seller signs off and they say, okay, we're going to get a loan, there is now a loan contingency. Why would your seller do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
But if that was the case, then now all the contingencies come into play. But if not, they can't cancel based on not being able to get a loan.
Correct.
Okay.
But if they can't perform then, so long term or kind of bigger picture is that the seller can then sue.
Potentially. That seller may want to speak to an attorney about their rights on going after the buyer for specific performance, because this is a binding contract, you guys. This is a contract, a legal binding contract between buyer and seller. And both parties need to be very, alert to the timelines and what's going on. And don't take those lightly. And, we're going to cover some things in here that are critically important for both the buyer and the seller. But I mean, many times I've seen agents really attacking buyer agents for, not having their contingencies removed. And you look at the file and you realize, well, you haven't even sent your AVID. You haven't done the termite. You haven't done, right? Well, do I have to? Well, Yes. Both parties have to perform. So if one party doesn't perform, then we come in with the notice to buyer to perform, and potentially that could be an issue. Okay?
What happens if you don't perform, say, after 21 days? You know, so that the consumer-
We're gonna get there in the contract. It's in your contract. I love this thing, and you're gonna hear from me a lot. What does your contract say? What does your contract say? And I'm not saying that, you guys, to be like flippant or rude. I'm saying that because I really want you to know that contract. I really want you to understand all the answers are right here, okay? And so I joke, and those of you who've been with me a while know I say this over and over and over. If you have insomnia, pull it out. One of two things is gonna happen, right? You're either gonna fall asleep, which is a win, or you're gonna master the contract, which is a win. So sleep with this thing. I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did. Okay, sale of buyer's property. This is if they have a property to sell and it has to close before they can close on this one. So this agreement and buyer's ability to obtain financing are not contingent upon the sale of the property owned by the buyer. Or B, this agreement and buyer's ability to obtain financing are contingent upon the sale of property owned by buyer. So if they have a property to sell, Mr. Buyer, do you have a property to sell? You have to ask that question when you're working with them, right? For two reasons. One, you need to know for the contract, but two, is it listed yet? Right? You're not gonna write an offer on a property that's contingent that's not even listed yet. But most important, I wanna list it. Right. I don't wanna give that up to anyone else, so I'm gonna jump on that one. Is it listed yet? Well, we need to have that listed. And I proceed, just like it's my listing, I'm representing you here, of course I'm gonna take that one and coordinate everything, right? So just jump on it and don't be shy about it. Just say, let's get this thing listed today so we can get offers and get it into escrow, and then we can present our offer with your property already in escrow. It's really hard right now for any offer that's contingent to even be looked at. Sellers just don't want to deal with it because the market's been too easy for the sellers to find cash buyers. So as things neutralize, that'll switch up a little bit, but you have to, again, think about the big picture and what it all means. So if they have a house to sell, let's get it done. If there's multiple offers on this and you know that property's not going to get accepted, think about Apex, right? We have a program that they'll come in and buy that buyer's property, so it'll free them up to buy the next house without a contingency. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, on the VAC, you're going to go to Apex Concierge and sign up and get the training, because it is so awesome to have this backup for your business. Okay, paragraph 5, those are the addenda and advisories. Hi, Mark. Okay, let me come up here. Addenda and advisories. So here's what I want you to know. There's lots of different documents, backup offer, addendum. So if it's already got an accepted offer and you're writing a backup, you're going to attach the BUO. The septic, if it's on septic, please read these. I know sometimes we're in a hurry, and Gina didn't say I had to check that box, so I'm not going to. Well, Gina didn't know that your property is on septic, right? So read this stuff and make sure you're aware with it. Short sales, we haven't seen too many short sales recently, have we? The addendum, court confirmation addendum if it's probate, other buyer and seller advisories. We've got the probate advisory, the trust advisory, short sale information advisory. The BIA, you'll notice, is already checked because that's automatically attached to the contract. SBSA, REO, and other. So if any of these boxes are checked, and of course, best practice, guys, always 100% of the time, mandatory if there's a loan, is you're going to check the boxes that say other, and then you're going to add affiliated business, marketing service agreement, and local area advisories. Okay, that's a RESPA violation not to. We must disclose at the outset, at the very beginning, that we have an affiliated interest in these companies. And to not do so is a RESPA violation, and those are big fines. So I don't want anybody ever caught up into that, all right? So, always make sure you, and a lot of agents say, well, I attach them. Well, that's great, but you know, unless you have proof that they were there, you don't, this is better security for you. If it's attached to the contract, nobody can say they never provided it. Does that make sense? So I always just make it a habit of attaching that stuff. It's not saying they have to use them. It's merely saying we have an affiliated interest, and should we be using them, we're gonna make money. That's what it says, and RESPA says we have to. Okay,
What's the third one, Gene? I'm sorry.
affiliated, the marketing service agreement disclosure, and the local area advisories. And we have one from Berkshire Hathaway. There's also one from CEDAR, and there's also one from Palm Springs Board. Any one of those is fine. They're all actually, they pretty much say the same thing, just on different letterheads. So just any one of those is fine. So when you type them in there though, understand they are now part of this contract. So this contract's 14 pages. It extends it because you're attaching those to the contract. So when escrow is opened, this and all the addenda and advisories that you're attaching must go to escrow to open escrow because it's part of it, okay? Paragraph 6 is other terms. And so this is where you're gonna disclose. And remember, if you're a realtor or if you're representing, because a lot of times they'll call us and say, will you represent me to buy or sell a house? If you're representing somebody who's a licensed agent, that has got to be disclosed. By law, you have to disclose that. So that's a perfect place to say buyer is a licensed real estate salesperson or buyer is a licensed real estate broker, okay? All right, allocation of costs. Let me grab some water here. Talking too much. Okay. So allocation of costs, unless otherwise agreed in writing, the paragraph only determines who's paying for inspection, test, certificate mentioned. It does not determine who is to pay for any work recommended or identified in the report. Makes sense. They have buyers have a home inspection. The home inspector says you need to have the AC serviced. It doesn't say that that person, whoever is checked on this box, is going to pay for it. It merely says who's paying for the reports. Okay, so paragraph 7A1, that's the natural hazard zone disclosure report. The only thing I want to add is just make sure you check the box that says environmental. Okay, especially if we represent that buyer, we want to make sure that our buyer is getting all the disclosures they're entitled to. And if there's any environmental issues, flood, fire, earthquake, they need to be aware of it so that they can get the appropriate insurance, right? And so, hi Vicki. So just make sure that box is always checked. And then pick 2 and 3, 7A 2 and 3, who pays for the following report? Again, 7A2 is where you would say wood pest inspection. Please don't say just termite report. I know that's the easiest, but it's not always about being easy. It's more than termites. What about rodents? What about, mice? What about other creatures that may be lurking behind the curtains? Right? I want to know about those creatures. If I'm the buyer, I want to know what's going on in that house. So you're going to have a wood pest inspection, and that covers everything. I see many times agents will pay sellers or buyers shall pay for the home inspection report. You do not have to put that. In fact, it's probably best if you leave that out of the contract because it's already covered in paragraph 12, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But when you open escrow, and if there's a loan, the lender says, send me a copy of the purchase agreement, right? It opens up other doors for the lender to now say, I want to see that home inspection report when you get it, right? Sometimes they'll ask for it, sometimes they don't even ask for it. But if it's on the contract, they're definitely going to ask for it, and that could potentially affect the loan. So that's why we say, it's already a given in the contract, so you don't need to restate it. Paragraph 7B, government requirements and retrofit. So whoever you check, buyer or seller, shall pay for smoke alarm, carbon monoxide device installation, water heater bracing if required by law. Prior to close of escrow, seller shall provide buyer written statements of compliance in accordance with state and local law unless seller is exempt. So those are the three things that are required in every single real estate transaction. You need a smoke, you need a carbon monoxide detector, and you need the water heater to be braced. Okay?
Cathedral City, are they, I haven't done in Cathedral City lately. Do they still require the fire department to go?
That's our very next sentence.
Oh.
That's awesome. So paragraph 2 is buyer or seller, whoever you're gonna check. Normally it's the seller, but depending on the market, it could be the buyer. Shall pay the cost of compliance with any other minimum mandatory government inspections and reports if required as a condition of closing escrow under any law. And what Josie was asking was, what does that mean? What does that paragraph mean? Mandatory government inspections are those like what I think used to be. I don't think they're doing them anymore.
Oh, okay, that's.
Palm Springs and Cathedral City used to have, you have to call the fire department and set an appointment 2 to 3 weeks in advance. So you'd have to jump on it. And they go in and they inspect the carbon and the smoke and all that good stuff. And they had to do a certification and give it to escrow before escrow could close. They did away with that. So that's a really good thing. So I don't know of any here in the desert right now of any mandatory government inspections and reports. And then paragraph 2, lowercase ii, either buyer or seller shall pay the cost of compliance with any other minimum mandatory government retrofit standards required as a condition of closing under any law, whether the work is required to be completed before or after close of escrow. So what is that? Retrofitting, right? So I guess if you're looking to buy a house, maybe from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, that's something you might want to really think about. Has it been updated with today's retrofitting standards? And out here, it's important. You know, we're in an earthquake zone. Everybody says, "Are you in an earthquake zone?" And I say, California is in an earthquake zone. We get them. I mean, it's not, it is what it is, but we get them. But if if you're buying a house that's built in, 2015, chances are it's pretty much up to code, you would think, right? So what is a house that we're talking about? Is that something that could be important? Talk to your buyer about it. And then if it's applicable, then I would definitely want the seller to pay for any retrofitting that would be required. It might be countered out saying we're not doing anything because that, again, they don't know the cost of that, right? So that might be something that could be applied on a repair request if it's found out. Okay. Okay, escrow and title. Of course, both buyer and seller boxes are always checked for this. Shall pay escrow fee, and the verbiage is always each to pay their own share. Unless in today's market, you know what I'm saying? Buyer to pay all of seller's closing costs, including escrow and title fees. I'm seeing some really interesting things. I like the one that buyer to pay seller to stay in the Ritz-Carlton for the next 30 days while they find another home. Anything's negotiable. If you want that house bad enough, it's funny what some buyers will do. Okay. And then of course, escrow holders shall be. Never leave that blank. If you can, obviously, we would love for you to write in legendary escrow. But there is a buyer that may be, if there's multiple offers, you may want to just find out from the seller, who's your favorite, escrow company, right? And then see, the party shall, and this is important, and everybody misses this. The party shall, within 5 days after receipt, sign and return escrow holders' general provisions. Those are your escrow instructions, right? The general provisions, the opening package, and what you want to make sure is if you're representing, whoever you're representing, the buyer or the seller, in this case, we're representing the buyer, find out how the buyer wants to receive their escrow opening package. Do they want it mailed? Do they want it emailed? Because sometimes, you know, they have their own printers that they can print everything out. Whatever their preference is, and then you tell escrow's gonna mail it. But then now you have to follow up with the buyer saying, did you receive it? You know, we have 5 days to get that back, so please go through, and if you have any questions, let me know. And then if they need to, if they want to set an appointment with the escrow officer for any signings, we can certainly make that happen. But just know they've got 5 days to return that. So that's something that you want to calendar and make sure that gets back. Okay, and then paragraph C2, buyer, seller. Normally the seller pays for the owner's title insurance policy. And then of course, owner's title policy to be issued by, you know, same thing. We obviously would love for you to put in land with title. Or if there's another escrow company that the seller's demanding, then that's what we need to do to get the offer accepted. Buyers shall pay for any title insurance policy insuring buyer's lender unless otherwise agreed in writing. Okay, so then the other costs, we've got the county transfer fee. We've got the city transfer fee. There's no cities out here that are actually charging that. If you have any questions, you can go to the websites and look, but there's no, right now, there's no city transfer tax or fee. Seller shall pay HOA transfer fee. Or buyer, depending on the scenario of how strong you want your offer. Paragraph 4, there's no choice. The seller shall pay HOA fees for preparing documents required to be delivered by Civil Code 4525. Okay, that's statutory and that can't be changed. Buyer or seller shall pay HOA fees for preparing all documents other than those required by Civil Code 4525. So there's the statutory requirements, and then maybe the buyer says, hey, I want these other minutes from this date or whatever that's, you know, not part of the package. If the buyer wants them, the buyer can pay for them. Okay, but the seller's gonna pay for all the statutory docs. Buyer or seller shall pay for any private transfer fee. A lot of our, well, all of our country clubs have a transfer fee, okay? And they range. And if you're not sure, you need to call the HOA or you need to call the agent and find out what the transfer fee is. Because they can range anywhere from $500 to $8,000 as the norm, okay? So you don't want to miss that one. And then there's a few extra, seller shall pay. And you could put whatever on those lines. For example, if your client says, I want the home professionally cleaned before I move in, right? You might say seller or buyer, and then if you want to gift it or the buyer wants to do it or however, again, you've got to take all this on a case-by-case basis. What do you have? Are there multiple offers here? Are there, you know, what's going on with this property to determine who's going to pay for what when you have that conversation with the buyer? But for a home cleaning, you're going to put on there that, you know, home to be professionally cleaned prior to close of escrow. In areas like, for example, Sun City, they have the LEC committee. When something goes into escrow, they have this committee that drives around and says, oh, there's not enough rocks in the yard. Oh, you removed a plant, you need to add 2 more. And they do this, and it has to be done prior to close of escrow, right? So who pays for that? Well, you want the seller to pay for it, right? If you're representing the buyer. And so I would put on there that sellers shall pay for any LEC violations.
Gina, sorry to interrupt.
It is the Lifestyle Enhancement Committee. But if it's not addressed at the time of the offer, it's something that's going to have to be renegotiated, like a repair request. And the whole point of this is you want it to be done and all taken care of, so you don't have to go back and keep renegotiating items. Okay. Next one, home warranty.
Gina,
Pay for the cost not to exceed. Please, please, please don't just unilaterally pick a number saying it can't be more than $500, because I promise you they are.
Gina, can you scroll down the page, please?
Oh, thank you, Rolando. Sorry about that. Okay. So, we're on D10 here. So shall pay for the cost not to exceed blank. Pull out over, we have our affiliations with Old Republic, with American Home Shield. If the buyer likes another company, I mean, it's whoever the buyer wants to use, really, I would talk to them and say, here are 3 pamphlets. Look at the cost. If you don't have the pamphlets, there's some in the back in our vendor area, but I always just go to the website and pull up the most recent brochure because prices tend to change. And you want to make sure you're looking at the most recent brochure, the brochure for pricing, because if you put $500 on that line and it comes back at say $750 because you had to add a pool, you had to add the roof, you had to add different things. Seller's only paying up to $500. The buyer's going to look at you and say, well, who's paying the other $250? You are. And you're going to smile and go, happy closing. Let me give you this as a gift. So you don't want to have to take out your checkbook. If you're taking your checkbook out, it should be because this is my gift to you that I want to give. It shouldn't be to fix a problem that we create. Okay. But you always want to check, no matter what, you always want to check the upgraded box that's right there and a 1-year home warranty plan issued by, have your buyer pick one, because your buyer's the one who has to live with that home warranty company at least for the next year. And if something should break, they have to be comfortable. And what we don't want is for them to come back and say, well, you picked them and they're horrible. Many times agents will give a gift to the buyer saying, I'm going to buy you your home warranty. And as a nice gesture, just remember, no good deed goes unpunished, right? So if you pick a home warranty company for them, you pay for the home warranty for them, and let's say their AC goes out and the home warranty says, no, we're not covering it. They're going to look and come back at you saying, you got me this and it's not covered. They're not going to pay for it. Now what are you going to do? It's not our fault, right? But it was our gift, and they do come back and look to us for that. So instead of saying, I'm going to pay for your home warranty, why don't you say, look, I'm going to give you a gift of $500 toward your costs that you could use toward whatever you want, such as a home warranty or whatever, right? That way you're not picking it, you're not setting it, you're giving the buyer a gift, and the buyer can choose whomever they wish. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. And then of course, make sure you're checking either the air conditioner, pool, spa, other, if it's got an old roof, you may want to add the additional roof coverage. Is it on septic, right? Is it on propane? Is it, all the various things that need to be covered, make sure you're including that on there. And then if buyer says, you know what, I dislike all home warranty companies. I don't want a home warranty. My husband's a contractor, or I'm a contractor, I'll do it myself. Then you're going to check the box right here that says buyer waives the purchase of a home warranty plan. Nothing in this paragraph precludes buyer from purchasing a home warranty plan during the term of the agreement. They can do whatever they want or do nothing, but we also have a waiver. If they're going to waive the home warranty, there's a BIW that they'll sign and then that way you're covered. Okay, paragraph 8. Any questions so far? How we doing? You with me? Do you need to stand up, Shay?
How many paragraphs are there?
Are y'all awake still? Okay. All right. I knew I should have brought more coffee. Glasses are filthy. Okay, so paragraph 8. Paragraph 8A, according to the California Association of Realtors Attorneys, paragraph 8A is the most talked about paragraph at the CAR Legal than any other paragraph in this contract. And that paragraph says, items listed as included or excluded in the MLS, flyers or marketing materials are not included in the purchase price or excluded from the sale unless specified in paragraph 8B or C. So what does that mean? It means your buyer walked through the house and pulled a beautiful flyer that said, house is furnished, beautiful appliances, refrigerator, washer, dryer. And then close of escrow comes in and there's nothing in the house, right? And your buyer's mad as a hornet. And you're thinking, what the heck? And the first question out of your manager's mouth is gonna be, did you ask for it in the contract? And if the answer is, well, no, it said on this flyer. No, unless you ask for it in the contract, it does not apply. And the same is, if they have, and I kid you not, guys, one house that I had shown, thought it was horrible, in the backyard, they had all these planters with all these plants, but the planters were old toilets. This is not a lie. This is a true story. So where normally they would want these beautiful planters, that buyer says, I want all those out of here, right? Who wants a backyard full of toilets? So that had to be in the contract under excluding, and we'll get to that. So if there's something that they don't want, you need to make sure that's in the contract to get this stuff out of there. If it's something that they want, whether it be furniture, but definitely you're gonna check stove, refrigerator, washer, dryer. If the buyer says, well, I want some of the furniture, while you're at that house, either take pictures of what they want or write down an inventory list of what they want, and you're gonna attach it to the contract saying, including the attached inventory list. Because and if the seller's selling it furnished, hopefully the seller has an inventory list that they downloaded on the MLS. If not, call the listing agent and say, do you have the inventory list? If he says, no, we'll get it to you. At least include what your buyer wants in the contract, because, this sounds really funny, but I know there's a few of you in the room that have dealt with this. Everything's included. We'll negotiate all that. We'll get you the list, blah, blah, blah. And halfway through escrow, they're fighting over a $500 item, and they're going to break the deal because of a personal property piece of $500. And it happens every day. Personal property is the biggest headache on the planet. We don't sell personal property. We don't work for Mathis Brothers. We are realtors, right? We accommodate, or I should say facilitate personal property, but we're not liable. In fact, there's a personal property release in Sky Slope that we like to use, just because we were saying, hey, it's not under any warranty. We're not liable for this. We have no idea if it works. And, it may not work after close of escrow. We don't know. That we're not responsible for that aspect of it. So just make sure that you understand all existing fixtures and fittings that are attached to the property are automatically included. Existing electrical, mechanical, lighting, plumbing, and heating fixtures, ceiling fans, fireplace inserts, gas logs and grates, solar power systems, built-in appliances, window and door screens, awnings, shuttings, window coverings, attached floor coverings, television antennas, satellite dishes, air coolers, conditioners, pool spa equipment, garage door openers, and the remote controls, mailbox, in-ground landscaping, tree shrub, water features and fountains, water softeners, water purifiers, security systems, alarms, and if following checked, you're to check the rest of those. Those are all fixtures. Those are all part of the property and should transfer with the property. Okay. The following additional items, that's if your client wants some of the furniture and property. I just caution you, if there is a loan on it, it has to either say furniture to be included at zero value, or furniture to be included per inventory, and my mind went blank. You're basically going to do it on a bill of sale outside of escrow. Okay. The reason is a lender does not want to loan on furniture. They're only going to loan on a house. So if you put that in there like that, they're going to make you rewrite the contract. And so just know it's either got to be at zero value or to be done on a bill of sale outside of escrow. Okay.
That's if something's owed on whatever.
No, it's for, let's say they want the living room furniture, they want the bedroom furniture, they want the patio furniture. But they're getting a loan to buy the house. The lender does not want a loan on the furniture, they only want a loan on the house. So we're gonna say the furniture that we're requesting is included at zero value. Or we're gonna do a separate bill of sale, so that the buyer's gonna pay separately for that. Lender, you're not loaning on this furniture. That's what that means.
I'm splitting hairs with this one, but you know how much I despise furniture.
I do, right there with you.
So just to be a devil's advocate, for example, one listing I had where we were selling a turnkey. And then the buyer came in and with their agent when they were doing some sort of walkthrough, I can't remember what the deal was, inspection. And they literally started pulling items out of the kitchen, whatever, and put them on the counter. And said, we don't want any of these things, you know, now, it had never been listed in here. Now, I go in, the agent calls me and says, okay, let's meet over there, I wanna show you what they're not, they want the sellers to take with them. They didn't take everything, it was just the most ridiculous.
The biggest problems we have is furniture.
Right, so that's one of those situations then, right, where you're saying, so let's just say that we say, okay, that's fine, now that the house looks like a mess, but you're gonna have to catalog all of that, right, and put that on an addendum, and we all have to sign off on that, is that what I'm hearing?
We should have an inventory list, whether it be pictures or an actual
So
list.
we had an inventory list, and then they went through the list after everything's been agreed, now they're doing their inspection, and they're there.
And then they change their mind.
And they were saying.
They say, I don't want that, don't want that, don't want that.
Literally, I walked in there and the tables, everything was covered with the items we didn't want. And now we're supposed to dispose, even though they had agreed. So I'm just,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
I do. So, could you guys on Zoom, did you hear the question or did you hear the comment?
No, there was, someone's not muted, I don't think.
Okay. So I'm not sure who's not muted, but let me just repeat it real quick, briefly. The buyer had, the seller had an inventory that was included, you know, with the MLS handout. The buyer made an offer, and agreed on the inventory. And then in escrow, they went in and they pulled out all this stuff from the cupboards that they did not want, and now they wanted seller to dispose of it. And so actually, again, this is why we don't want to deal with furniture. Technically, that's contractual that buyer has agreed to buy it. So technically, as a buyer's agent, I would have said, no, we're going to dispose of it at close of escrow because it's included. Give it to who you want. We can call up Martha's Village. We can do whatever with this, but it's part of the contract. So now they want to renegotiate, and anything should be done in writing and agreed to by all parties. The seller would be within the rights to say, no, we're not doing that, it's
which
yours.
is what, I mean, we didn't put it in writing, but I went back and said, some cookies.
Good.
And I literally went back over there and put everything back in the.
Yeah.
But okay, so, right, because that's a renegotiation.
It's a renegotiation and they don't have to. You're welcome.
So if you are selling
Crazy.
turnkey, do you have to?
Let's
go
talk
through-
about turnkey.
Yes, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about turnkey for a minute. So here in the desert, this is another reason why out of area agents have a challenge. In our world, turnkey means everything is there. Glasses, forks, blankets. It's like hotel ready, right? The buyer can move in with their clothes and their toothbrush and they're good to go. Everything else. And what? And booze, yes. So they bring their stuff and they move in and everything is included there. In other areas, turnkey means the house is move-in ready. It doesn't mean it's furnished. If you go and you Google turnkey, you're gonna find all kinds of different explanations. If you go to CAR, to the DRE site, there is no definition. So that's why it's one of those areas that is so, you have so many problems because there's nothing set forth. So you have to be specific. You have to say, this is what's included, or this is what's excluded, and it has to be in writing. But just know that when it says turnkey, don't assume everything's gonna be there. It's gonna depend on the agent and what their interpretation of turnkey really means. So that's why the lists are important. Does that answer your question?
So if you're making a list, I mean, I'm thinking of kitchens. So do you have to say 8
No.
forks, 8?
No, because you know what happens, and that's where you really wanna pull your hair out. Some sellers do. I have seen sellers that went through their house and they, down to every spoon, they had it listed. But if I'm representing a buyer, you know what I do? I open the cupboards and I take a picture of the cupboard. I open the drawer, I take a picture of the drawer. I'll label the top, the property address, the date. I put about 4 pictures on a page, and at the bottom I have the buyer and easy for me to say, buyer and seller sign it. So this is what you get, because you know what? Glasses break. What happens if a glass breaks in escrow? Are you gonna get that phone call saying, you promised me 8 and I only have 7? And I'm telling you, they would. It's that crazy. So I've seen worse, and your hair would just stand on edge if you knew some of these things that we've seen. So here's what it's gonna look like when you move in, buyer. How many, I don't know. But I do take pictures. I prefer pictures because it's funny how that Tiffany set of flatware becomes a Walmart special at close of escrow. So, and I've had, if you want to believe it or not, they did not leave blankets. And I have found myself going to Walmart at 11 o'clock at night to buy a darn blanket because these people moved in late and there was no blankets in the house and it was supposed to be turnkey with blankets. It's what we do, babies. It's what we do. So yeah, that's the thing about included and excluded. Just make sure whatever you want, ask for it. Whatever you don't want, state it. And then know that the existing phone and home automation systems, we've got so many smart homes going on right now, it's not even funny.
So we will do like an addendum or to do the things that we want?
An inventory, it's a separate inventory list. Yeah. Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so anything, the home automation systems, including necessary components such as intranet and internet connected hardware devices, control units, other than non-dedicated mobile devices, electronics, and computers, and applicable software permissions, password codes, and access information are or are not included in the sale. What if the buyer moves in and says, I don't want a smart home. I want all this stuff taken out. Can you ask for that?
Yes.
Yes, of course you can. Just check this box. Just check that box. They're not included. We want a stupid house. We don't want a smart house. I don't want anything smarter than me in there. So that's paragraph 4. Okay, now we're going to move down to leased or liened items. And there are lots of these out there. It could be solar. It could be water softener. It could be propane. It could be, there's just a variety of things that could potentially be leased. Or what's liened. It could be like the HERO program, that they put, and for those of you who may not know what the HERO program is, it is a way that some of the energy efficient companies, let's say they went door to door and said, hey, we'll come in and we'll do, whether it be double pane windows, a new AC unit, solar, whatever this energy efficient is, we're going to come in, we're going to install it, and you're going to pay us nothing right now. It's going to add to your property tax bill that, it's probably, whatever, $500-600 that it adds to it or whatever, twice a year, and you just add it to your property taxes, and you don't have to worry about leasing it or making monthly payments on it. And some homeowners said, oh, that sounds fantastic, let's do it. And they did it. And they had all these home energy stuff put on the house. And then they tried to sell it. But because it's on a property tax bill, it becomes a tax lien. And lenders do not lend on properties that have a tax lien on it, because tax liens are always in first position, and this would put a lender in second position. So it's really important. That is one of the number one reasons why you must 100% of the time order a property profile with the deeds prior to writing any offer or prior to taking any listing. That is so critical because right on the tax page, it outlines what the taxes are and what the special assessments are. And if there is a hero loan on it, it's always in bright red and it'll pop up saying hero/pays and tell you what that amount is. So that's really super important because, you know, your buyer needs to know. Now, if they're paying cash, it's not a big deal. But if they're getting a loan, you need to call that listing agent and say, will the seller, and usually when there's a loan on the or when you look at the property profile and you pull it, there is the lien, the tax thing that outlines what the payments are and how far out they go. So you can see how many years is this going to be on the property. And you can pretty much estimate what the balance is and see, is there enough equity on this house to cover the hero loan? Because seller, if that's the case, you want to make sure you're putting in here seller to pay hero loan prior to close of escrow or by close of escrow. That needs to be on there. So that's a really important thing. Okay. But that's a liened item. And then, of course, items excluded from sale, unless otherwise specified, the following items are excluded: audio and video components such as flat screen TV, speakers, or other items. If any such item is not itself attached to the property, even if a bracket or other mechanism attached to the component or item is attached to the property. Furniture and other items secured to the property for earthquake purposes and whatever. So you have your buyer, you're walking through the house, you're showing properties, and you see flat screen TVs, and the house is being sold unfurnished, okay? You need to look at your buyer and say, do you have flat screen TVs? Or do you want me to make sure these brackets are removed? Because you know these big metal brackets that are attached to the wall, that's a fixture. According to this contract, that has to stay in the wall. Unless you check this box right here that says brackets will be removed and holes or other damage shall be repaired but not painted. Okay, so check with your buyer. No, I have flat screens, leave the brackets. Awesome. No, I don't have flat screens. I want these off, or I'm going to put them somewhere else. Then you check that box. Okay. Okay. Closing in possession. How are we doing on time here? How's my watch only have 10% left power? Okay. Okay. 11:36. Okay. You guys okay?
Yes.
All right. So, closing in possession, A, buyer intends or does not intend to occupy the property as buyer's primary residence. That is important because of what? Liquidated damages, right? When we get to the liquidated damages, you'll see. But if it's buyer's primary residence, liquidated damages will come into play. Lenders need to know this too. So that's important. So you're going to ask the buyer, will you be using this as your primary residence? Seller occupied or vacant property, possession shall be delivered, and I'm going to read what the contract default is. Possession shall be delivered to buyer at 6 p.m. on the date of close of escrow. Okay, many times I see agents go in and put noon or 3 or 5. Stop it. Don't do that again, because as soon as you put noon, it could be up to the reason they put 6 p.m. is because it can take until 6 p.m. for it to record with the county recorder's office. Okay, of course, if it closes at 2 or at noon or at 3, when we get that call from escrow or title saying we are confirmed, that means the deed has recorded, the buyer is now the owner of the property. Then and only then will we go and hand the keys over to the buyer. But so don't put a time. And that's why I'm really glad that the contract's changing in December to upon recordation. So as soon as it's recorded, then you're good to go. But it defaults to 6, and just explain to your buyer. If it records early, you're going to get the keys as soon as it records, but it could take up to 6 p.m. And that's why it says this in the contract. Okay? Okay. Seller remaining in possession. Let's go to the next page here. Okay, seller remaining in possession after close of escrow. If seller has the right to remain in possession after close of escrow, the parties are advised to sign a separate occupancy agreement, such as CAR Form SIP for seller continued occupancy of less than 30 days, or CAR Form RLAS for seller continued occupancy for 30 days or more. And the parties are advised to consult with their insurance and legal advisors for information about liability and damage or injury to persons and personal and real property. And buyer is advised to consult with buyer's lender about the impact of seller's occupancy on buyer's loan. So if the buyer's getting a loan on the property and the seller says, well, I need to stay in it for 30 days or 45 days, you need to talk to the lender to see, is this going to work? Because sometimes that could be then considered an investment property. Interest rates change, loans change, it changes everything. So it's super important that, remember I said, you're going to be best friends with that lender. These are some of the reasons why. You just have to have those conversations. But if it's less than 30 days, you must attach the SIP. That's seller in possession. And it outlines who's going to pay for what. It outlines that the sellers are going to keep their utilities on and continue paying for them until they are no longer in possession. It outlines all the legal ramifications, so to speak. If it's more than 30 days, then you're going to do the residential lease after sale, the RLAS. Please, one more thing I want to say about that, because it just came up as well. When you are looking at, like, say, for example, seller in possession, let's say 7 days or 5 days after escrow. And we're going to use this weekend for an example because it was a long holiday weekend, right? So the seller had an SIP for 5 days and it closed on, let's say, Thursday. So it closes on Thursday. That means Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, today, that seller has to be out, right? But because it just closed, they don't have closing funds yet, because it can take escrow 24 to 48 hours to close their books and wire the money, just depending on the scenarios. So the seller can't leave. Okay, so what does that mean? It means probably someone should have looked at the calendar and determined when those 5 days ended. Maybe worked it out 10 days or whatever, but prepare everybody, because, you know, these are all those days that seller had in possession meant nothing by escrow because everybody was closed. So again, back to when you're looking at setting timelines and dates, please open your calendar before you agree to this and really look and see, what does this mean to the buyer? What does this mean to the seller? And is escrow going to be able to get this done? And if you're not sure, call escrow and say, hey, how fast? And again, it's going to depend. What time did it record? If it recorded at 6 o'clock at night, they're not even going to get the paperwork back until the next day. And then it could take another 24 hours for them to get the money and then wire it out. You know, you just can't wire money in and out necessarily. Sometimes it has to come in and then it goes out the next day. So make sure, I always look at us like we're the orchestra leaders, okay? In escrow, we are that band leader standing in front, and we are conducting with the different parties. Now, it's your turn to do this, your turn to do this, did you do this, did you do this? You have to be in charge and make sure that everybody's getting stuff done, and that includes you. So check with escrow if you're not sure about that. Look and make sure on dates, but that seller remaining in possession. Let's say it's tenant occupied. So tenant occupied property, paragraph D, property shall be vacant at least 5 days prior to close of escrow unless agreed to in writing. Note to seller, if you're unable to deliver property vacant in accordance with the rent control and other applicable law, you may be in breach of this agreement. So if they don't want the tenant there and they've given the tenant appropriate notice, and it has to be, if they've been there longer than a year, you have to give 60 days notice for that tenant to leave, right? So you're not going to really be able to ask for a 30-day escrow if the tenant's been in there longer than a year, and no, you have to give 60 days notice. Again, communication is vital. So pick up the phone. Hey, a listing agent, there's a tenant in place. When is that lease up? Right? If it's a fixed lease that's in place, let's say the lease is a fixed lease and it doesn't expire for another 8 months. The buyer has to buy that house contingent upon that lease. I mean, that lease is in place and you have to honor that lease. You cannot kick the tenant out. You could potentially ask the tenant, hey, if I give you cash for keys, would you be in agreement if I mean, and I've seen homeowners doing everything, literally offering to pay for them to move, and I'll pay your first and last if you just get out. And still the tenants won't move. It's a weird time right now. It's just a weird time right now. So make sure you're on the phone. What's your tenant like? Are they cooperative? I mean, and I've even had family members fighting, refusing to move out. I mean, some of this stuff is just crazy that you don't even think about, but everything goes back to the contract. So please, please, please call the list. What do we need to do? How long does that tenant need? If it's on a month to month, you can just give it, or not you, but the the seller just needs to give that tenant enough notice to get out, or the buyer's buying the property based on that lease already in place, okay? So if the tenant's not out 5 days prior and it's supposed to be given to you vacant, what do you do? Call Gina. What do we do? Tenant won't leave. Well, first of all, you talk to your buyer, right? Everything starts with, you're facilitating a transaction between buyer and seller, so keep those communication lines open. So talk to the buyer. Buyer, what do you want to do? The tenant's not moving. If we close escrow in 5 days, you may have an eviction that you're going to have to start with, right? Do you want to do that? If it's an investor buyer, you may say, oh, I'll take the tenant and deal with them later, right? If it's not, if somebody buying it because they want to live in it, they're going to say, I don't want to deal with that. Okay, then we're going to have to extend escrow until, how do you want to proceed? You want to extend the escrow? Do you want to cancel? You know, what do you want to do? Now go back and communicate with the listing broker. But definitely, if there's a tenant in place that's supposed to be gone and the buyer does not want that tenant there and the tenant has not moved, call escrow and hold closing. Say, do not close, and put it in writing. I am instructing you not to close until we work this issue out, because you don't want your buyer to have to take on a tenant that they're going to now have to evict, right?
So where does the seller or a listing agent come into play when you're discussing this with escrow?
You're going to tell the listing agent, you've got to get this tenant out there. If he's not out, we're not closing. So now the listing agent's going to go back to the seller saying, you need to get your brother-in-law out of that house, right? Or whomever it is, get him out of the house so we can close escrow, or it's not going to close. And if it doesn't close, then, you know, the buyer can potentially cancel.
And see, Gina, just out of curiosity, so you're filling this out, and, you know, a lot of this information, how do you know? You know, you went to see the house, your buyer likes it, you're going to make an offer. You know, you could call, you know, the listing agent, I suppose.
That's a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up. So how do you know if the seller needs to stay in the house after close of escrow?
Yeah.
Normally, it will say in the MLS, because it'll have close of escrow, you know, when it says buyer can take possession when, and you can say close of escrow or after 3 days, or it should be noted in the MLS. If it's not in the MLS, then we would presume that there's no SIP needed. But let's say you get a counteroffer back saying seller to remain in possession for 7 days after closing. If they did not attach an SIP, you need to call that listing agent and say, I need an SIP.
Right. Okay.
Send me your SIP and I'll present it with your counter.
So that's coming from the listing agent.
Yeah, but if you see it in the MLS saying that the seller's going to need 7 days after closing to move, then just automatically check that if the buyer's good with it and give them the 7 days.
Got it.
Okay? Good question. Thank you. Okay. Let's say the tenant's going to stay. It's an investor buyer, and he says, right on, I want that tenant. He's a good tenant. You'll check that box at right there under D where it says tenant to remain in possession, and you're going to attach a TIP, a tenant in possession. Okay? All these acronyms. I know this is a different vocabulary, isn't it? Dave's over there shaking his head going, what? Okay, it only gets worse. All right, so at close of escrow, seller assigns to buyer any assignable warranty rights for items included in the sale, and seller shall deliver to buyer available copies of any such warranties. Brokers cannot and will not determine the assignability of any warranties. At close of escrow, unless otherwise agreed in writing, seller shall provide keys, passwords, codes, and/or means to operate all locks, mailboxes, security systems, alarms, home automation systems, intranet and internet connected devices included in the purchase price, and garage door openers. If the property is a condominium or located in a common interest subdivision, buyer may be required to pay a deposit to the HOA to obtain keys to accessible HOA facilities. So pretty standard, but you know, if the seller says, I don't know where this garage door opener is, they need to find it and give it to you, or, you know, provide it, because it's part of the contract. They need to give it to you. Again, if it's an HOA, it's pretty common practice that you take the deed, you go to the HOA, hi, I'm the new owner, I need to buy gate transponder, and you have to pay for them. That's not up to the seller to do it. It's up to the new owner to buy their own gate transponders to get in and out of their house. Okay. Any questions there? We good? Okay. I'm glad to see those couple of you I see on Zoom are still awake. Good to see your beautiful faces. Okay. We are moving into paragraph 10. Paragraph 10. Now, I get this a lot. What disclosures do I need to send? It's in your contract, and it's on our checklist, but we're going to go over that right now. So, paragraph 10A, statutory and other disclosures, including lead-based paint disclosures and cancellation rights. So, A1, seller shall, within the time specified in 14A, deliver to buyer. 1, if required by law, a fully completed federal lead-based paint disclosure. So, when do we need a lead-based paint disclosure? 1978, right, pre-1978. So if it was built on January 1, 1978, do you need it? No, because in one day, all lead-based paint was eliminated. Just kidding. But you just don't need it after January 1, 78. All right. And 2, unless exempt, fully completed disclosures or notices required by sections 1102 et set and 1103 et set of the Civil Code. Statutory disclosures. Statutory disclosures include, but are not limited to, a real estate transfer disclosure statement, that's your TDS, a natural hazard disclosure statement, the NHD, notice or actual knowledge of release of illegal controlled substance, notice of special tax and or assessments, or if allowed, the substantially equivalent notice regarding the Melrose Community Facilities Act of 1982 and Improvement Bond Act of 1915, and if seller has actual knowledge of industrial use and military ordnance locations, CAR form SPQ or ESB. So you're thinking, how on earth am I going to know all that, right? You don't have to. That's where the NHD report comes in. That's why that is such a critical document, is because all those disclosures are in the NHD report. We will never do an NHD statement. That's a one-page statement that you print out from the zip forms. We will not do that, because why would you want to be liable saying, no, it's not in a fire zone? You don't know that. You don't know that. So always just do your natural hazard zone disclosure report, including environmental, and all that stuff that it just said in that paragraph is included. Okay. Any statutory disclosure required by this paragraph is considered fully completed if seller has answered all questions and completed and signed the seller sections, and the seller's agent, if any, has completed and signed the seller's brokerage firm sections, or if applicable, an agent visual inspection disclosure, CAR form AVID. Nothing stated herein relieves the buyer's brokerage firm, if any, from the obligation to 1, conduct a reasonably competent and diligent visual inspection of the accessible areas of the properties, and disclose on section 4 of a TDS or an AVID material facts affecting the value or desirability of the property, that were or should have been revealed by such an inspection, or complete any sections on all disclosures required to be completed by buyer's brokerage firm. What the heck do you have to do? What does that mean? It means in every transaction, you're gonna make sure, unless exempt, and the exempt would be if it's, not a natural person or a trustee, for example, who might have been appointed by the court, who's never been inside that home. You know, if it's in a court appointed trustee, for example, this is a guy who has a stack of files on his desk. And they're just running him through the systems. He's never been in the house. He has no idea. So is he gonna do a TDS? No, he can't. He's never been inside the house. They'll do an ESD, an exempt salary disclosure, but they're not gonna do the transfer disclosure statement. And so if you look at the trust advisory, if it's in a trust, for example, it lists on there the requirements, whether or not they have to do the TDS or the SPQ. So you'll look at that on a case-by-case basis. But if not, you're gonna make sure that the TDS is done, the transfer disclosure statement. And what this says is on page 3 of the TDS, there's a section 4 for the listing broker to complete. I do not recommend you ever check the box that says see attached AVID. Don't do that, because lenders ask for TDS forms. If you check that box, you've now incorporated your AVID into the TDS, and the lender's gonna wanna see that too. And I have seen lenders not give loans because something that an agent may have said that the agent should not have said. They weren't, you know, licensed in that capacity, right? So the only thing you're gonna say on page 4 of the TDS is you're gonna check the box that says agent notes the following, and then their verbiage 100% of the time will be agent recommends professional home inspection. That's on the TDS. Then you're gonna take your AVID, your agent visual inspection, you're gonna go to the property and go room by room, and you're gonna do your visual inspection stating objective findings, not subjective findings. So what does that mean? It means if you see a stain on the ceiling, you're not gonna say, whoa, large stain on ceiling, because that's subjective. What might be large to you might be little to someone else, and vice versa, right? Now that's a small stain. They might say, oh my God, that's enormous. So all you're gonna say is stain on ceiling. You're not gonna say water stain on ceiling because you have no idea what caused that stain, right? You're not gonna say mold in kitchen. You might think it's mold, it might be mold, but you're not licensed in that capacity. So you're gonna say stains under sink in kitchen. Buyer to retain a qualified specialist for further review, okay? You're not gonna say who they should hire, but you're going to say buyer to retain a qualified specialist. And now buyer's gonna say, well, who should we hire? Hey, good question. Let's ask the inspector, because normally you're doing this at the inspection. Hey, Mr. Inspector, what do you think? Who do you think we should have look at this? Right? Disclose, deflect. Disclose, deflect. That keeps you out of lawsuits. So those are the two things that you're gonna make sure absolutely done, and with your notes on them. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
When we're gonna do buyer to retain a qualified specialist, are we gonna write down that in the added?
Yes, definitely. So if I look under and I see what I believe that could be mold, I'm gonna put on there wherever the area is, maybe something to the effect of there's an issue under the kitchen sink, or there's, you know, there's a problem under the kitchen sink. I don't want to say there's mold under the kitchen sink because I'm not a mold specialist, but I am going to point it out saying, hey, we have a problem here. Buyer to retain a qualified specialist for further review. Buyer's going to come and say, who should I use?
Okay.
And then we're going to say, well, you know, either give 3 names or ask the home inspector. You just are deflecting the liability to someone who really knows.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
You're very welcome. Hi, Josh.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you, thank you. It's been a while.
Oh, it looks beautiful where you were.
Yeah, it was gorgeous.
Nice.
Take care.
Okay.
Gina, when do you get or see the SPQ?
The SPQ is always goes with a TDS, but the SPQ is only for the seller to complete, not you. The TDS and the AVID, that you have a role on both of those. but not the SPQs. That's why we're talking about those.
Okay.
Okay, so if you're doing a TDS, and you'll see that in our next paragraph here. But if you do a TDS, then you use the SPQ. If they're exempt from the TDS, then you use the ESD. Okay, the ESD stands for the exempt seller disclosure.
So.
You'll get it, don't worry.
I'm gonna have PTSD when I leave. That's a lot of vowels, right?
For example, on REO, so they don't
Oh,
have,
they're exempt.
they don't have to send any SPQs and PDS.
Exactly. They should send an ESD, but as any of us who've been through the REO era know, it's whatever they want to do.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, we don't have to do that.
We're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And I've even seen REO agents say, I'm not doing any of it. Those are bad REO agents, but I've seen them out there. Because you're always 100%, you're required to do your agent visual inspection. I would love to see them do away with that, and I know they're in the talks of doing away with that because it takes on a heck of a lot of liability that we're not qualified to do, right? We're just not, but for now, we have to do it. If, in that case, Julia, if I am representing a buyer and it's on an REO property and they come back and say, yeah, we're not sending you anything, I'm gonna go to my buyer, I'm gonna have a heart-to-heart saying, and here's what Darren, our attorney, says. Print out the disclosures that they're required to provide and give them to the buyer, not filled out, just blank disclosures, saying this is the information you're supposed to receive from the seller. They have refused to send this. Do you want to move forward?
But in a way, it's not that they refuse to send it because if the seller, if, let's say for a bank, they've never been in the property.
That's where the ESC comes in, but there is not one REO property that doesn't go to an asset manager, and that asset manager is going in, they're painting, they might clean up the car, and some of them, right? They might do just, move the dead bodies, clean out the trash from the back, and then they list it for sale, right? They have to disclose on the ESD, have you done any work to this property? Have you added any appliances? If all the appliances are ripped out, sometimes they'll do that, otherwise they'll leave it blank, but they know the condition, at least the asset manager does. So they should at least say, we've painted, put carpet, and, remove the debris. They have to do something.
Remove the body.
Exactly.
Well, and case in point also now with that Zillow.
With Zillow. Yes,
Just FYI.
oh my gosh. So, and thank you for bringing that up because that's real time. You're going to see more of this out there. Zillow buys properties and then they're turning them over and they're treating them like an REO, so to speak. We've never been in the property. We just bought this like an e-buyer. They go in and buy them as the e-buyer and then they're going to turn around and flip them. And they don't even use any CAR forms.
And in the case of that one that I had, they actually had gone to the registry,
Yes.
but they will not provide an ESP.
So the biggest problem is, that's against statutory law, right? They're not complying with California law. Problem is, I have not met one agent who's willing to file a lawsuit and go to the Supreme Court to fight them. And until there's a Supreme Court decision saying, yes, you are mandated to do this, we keep moving forward, beating our heads against the wall. So they are required, or in fact, even on this one, we had talked to our attorney about it, print out all the disclosures that California law requires, TDS, SPQ, ESD, your AVID, whatever it is, print it out, hand it to your buyer and say, these are what the sellers should be providing you. They are not providing these forms. So if you want this house, you do your home inspection, you do all your due diligence before you even think of moving forward. But how do you feel? Do you want to move forward? Are you comfortable, or do you want to back out? And that's how I would present it to the buyer. But I would be perfectly honest. I'd let them know what they should be getting, so they can read the questions and see, is this important to me? And then go on from there. Many times it's an investor and they don't care because they're going to just turn around and flip those REOs anyway, and they're going to go in and gut them. So it's not as important to an investor buyer as it is a buyer who's buying that house for their primary residence. Okay. Okay.
How about probate?
Same thing. They may be exempt. So, but most of the time though, if it's a probate, you're at least gonna get the ESD. You don't, I haven't seen the fight back on probates as much as I have like REOs or Zillow or I think those are the main ones that just, it's really like pulling your hair out trying to get information. Now, I've dealt, just on the flip side of that, there's a couple really great REO agents out here that I've worked with, and you get everything. You get their AVID, you get the ESD, you get the disclosures, like you're supposed to, and they do an excellent job. But not all agents are like that. Okay. All right. Paragraph 3. Note to buyer and seller, waiver of statutory and lead disclosures is prohibited by law. So they don't get a TDS, they don't get an ES, they don't get the disclosures. And the buyer says, oh, I don't care, I'll waive it. Okay. But that buyer potentially may be speaking to their attorney after close of escrow about the seller's failure to provide the statutory disclosures. Okay. All right. Within the time specified in paragraph 14A, seller, unless exempt from the obligation to provide a TDS, shall complete and provide buyer with the seller property questionnaire. If seller is not required to provide a TDS, seller shall complete and provide buyer with an exempt seller disclosure. So that answers that question. Okay, buyer shall, within the time specified in 14B, return signed copies of the statutory lead and other disclosures to the seller. So you sent them all to the buyer. Gina, the buyer's agent's not sending me back the signed documents. That happens, but you know, it just happens. Well, paragraph 10A5 of the RPA instructs that they have to. So what is CAR's opinion on it? CAR says you have to request it 3 times. So if you've mailed the seller disclosures to the buyer, right? And the buyer hasn't signed them or sent them back, you might want to, if you're the listing agent, you want to send them an email. You might want to send them a text. You might want to pick up the phone, but each time make sure you're documenting your file. So if you've requested it 3 times and they never got signed and returned, document your file, requested on this date, buyer has not returned. You're good to go. You can't force somebody to do something, all right? But you need to at least give it your all-star try to get these documents back. When you're representing the buyer, same thing. You can request certain things from the seller. You request it 3 times. You have that conversation with your buyer saying, here's where we are. Here's where what you should be getting. How do you want to proceed? Right? And you have that conversation just so they're well aware of what's going on.
Should have the right to proceed or the right to cancel at that.
Sure.
Okay.
And if they haven't, let's say sellers never provided the seller disclosures and the contract says within 7 days, send a notice to seller to perform. And we'll get to that paragraph too. Okay. So in the event seller or seller's brokerage firm prior to close of escrow becomes aware of adverse conditions materially affecting the property or any material inaccuracy in disclosures, information, or representations previously provided to buyer, seller shall promptly provide a subsequent or amended disclosure or notice in writing covering those items. However, a subsequent or amended disclosure shall not be required for conditions and material inaccuracies of which buyer is otherwise aware or which are disclosed in reports provided to or obtained by buyer or ordered and paid for by buyer. So what that means is seller puts the house on the market, we do all the disclosures, put them in our file. But by the time we get into escrow, maybe they left the water running in the bathroom and there was a flood. So seller, oh my gosh, so runs in there, cleans everything up, right? That TDS needs to be amended, or the SPQ needs to be amended, addressing the issue that they just had to fix. Because those are questions in those documents, okay? But let's say the buyer, we're in escrow now, the buyer has a home inspection and they discover something that the seller was even unaware of, right? That disclosure doesn't have to be amended because the buyer just found out in the report. That's what that paragraph means. Okay. Okay, you're very welcome. Okay, If any disclosure or notice specified in 10A1 or subsequent or amended disclosure or notice is delivered to buyer after the offer is signed, buyer shall have the right to cancel this agreement within 3 days after delivery in person or 5 days after delivery by deposit in the mail or by electronic record, satisfying the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act by giving written notice of cancellation to seller or seller's agent. So, again, let's think about this. We have 7 days to provide disclosures. Buyer has 17 days to complete their inspections and remove. So buyer signs everything that the seller sent. Let's say the listing agent forgot to send you the AVID, but they sent you everything else, right? You've got the termite, you've got the NHD, you've got all these reports. Those were done in the 7 days. And now the seller's agent is yelling at you saying, give me my contingency removal. You don't have to remove, and you shall not remove any contingencies until you receive that AVID. That's part of the statutory requirements. So you get the AVID on day 20. How long do you have before you have to remove those contingencies? You now have an additional 5 days. If they emailed it to you, it's right here in the contract. So your contingency removal date is now extended to day 25 because the listing agent was lazy.
So we have to get a name.
Oh, absolutely.
I haven't gotten one
It's
for this, but I
statutory.
was doing it.
It's statutory. So do not remove contingencies until you've had all the disclosures. Okay? That's part of your inspection. When you're representing a buyer, those disclosures are all part of the inspection process. And you cannot remove your inspection contingencies if you've not been provided all the reports. Okay? And that paragraph is right there, 10A7. 3 days if they hand deliver them to your buyer, or 5 days if mailed or by electronic, which would be email. Okay. The natural and environmental hazard disclosures and other booklets. Seller shall deliver to buyer the earthquake guide, the environmental hazards booklet, home energy rating pamphlet, disclose if property is located in a special flood, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is your NHD report. The reason I like to order it, and then when the report comes, just forward that email, is because in NHD companies will give you lots of links. Here's the link to the environmental hazards guide. Here's the link to this. Here, you just email that directly to your buyer, and then the buyer can sign the receipt that they received all these reports. Do not print out the books because they're like 120 pages, you know, they're crazy. And your buyer, what are the buyers going to do with those? So send them the links, tell them to save it. Here's the links to all the information about your property, and they can save it on their computer and be good to go. Withholding taxes. This is an area that is, I think a lot of agents struggle with. Within the time specified in paragraph 14A, to avoid required withholding, sellers shall deliver to buyer or qualified substitute an affidavit sufficient to comply with FERPA and California withholding law. And you'll see it says CAR form AS or QS. So that pertains to foreign owners, for example. So if you're a foreign owner, withholding is mandatory. They just have to withhold the taxes. Escrow takes care of that. But if they're not, they have to certify that they're not a foreign owner, okay? And that's the seller's affidavit of non-foreign status. So as a listing agent, you should have your client sign the seller's affidavit of non-foreign status. You provide that to the buyer. Don't worry because they took off the requirement of putting, it used to have required the seller's social security number on it. And so many sellers said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not giving my social security number out. So that's where the qualified substitute comes in. You get that from escrow, but it can only be an escrow company that's licensed with the Department of Business Oversight. A broker-owned escrow company cannot do a qualified substitute. So that's another reason you want to make sure what escrow company you're using, make sure they're part of, you know, they're part of the Department of Business Oversight so they can do these things. So what does that mean? It means seller's going to give escrow their social security number, and then escrow will do what's called a qualified substitute saying, yes, I have seller's information for withholding purposes, and everybody signs it. So you either need the seller's affidavit or you need the QS, the qualified substitute. If you don't, you can do a third thing. If you represent the buyer and the property, and don't laugh, is under $300,000, not a lot of those, But if it's under $300,000 and the buyer's going to be using it for their personal residence, then you're going to do a buyer's affidavit. And the reason these are so important, I'm gonna give you a quick scenario. Escrow does not withhold. For whatever reason, escrow does not withhold. We're talking about Canadian sellers, for example. They sell their house, they go back to Canada, withholdings are not done, and the IRS sees the recordings and goes, all right, where's my money?
Right.
They're gonna go right after to the buyer and say, well, the seller didn't pay their taxes, so buyer, you owe us seller's taxes, withholding, because you should have gotten these forms. Your buyer's gonna say, wait, what? Why do I have to pay these taxes? And guess who they're gonna come after? You. They're gonna say, why didn't you tell me? Why I hired you to protect me. What's going on? And you're gonna say, because I couldn't get this from the seller. I demanded escrow to withhold. Here's my letter to escrow demanding that they withhold. Now we deflect right back to escrow. See? So if you get the seller's affidavit or the qualified substitute or the buyer's affidavit, and if you can't do any of those three, then you instruct escrow to withhold and that'll cover you. But it has to be done before escrow closes. Because after escrow closes, it's, bells already rang.
Now, you said this is with regard, you mentioned to
Foreign owners.
Tina, can you scroll down the page too?
Thank you.
One second here, go ahead.
the foreign sellers, withholding taxes apply to them as well, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
so that's why escrow withholds and then sends the money to the IRS and the franchise tax book.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, Rolanda, did you have a question?
Just if you can scroll down the page.
Thank you for keeping me on my toes. Okay, I think we're right there. There, we're on C, withholding taxes there. Sorry, sir.
So, but it's only if the seller is foreign.
Yeah, because
Not the
anybody else
buyer.
is gonna fill out all the forms in escrow. And there's a form, I forget the number, 590 or something, that they fill out saying who they are and whether or not withholding is required. And again, when your seller comes to you and says, how do I fill out this form? You're gonna tell them, go talk to your CPA. We don't give tax advice. We cannot give tax advice. So it's important. Well, I don't have a CPA. Well, call one. Get your questions answered by a qualified specialist. We cannot give tax advice. We cannot give legal advice. And just remember, the only reason we can talk about contracts is because we are trained in the CAR form. Okay, that's why we can discuss this. This is where our expertise is. This is why when a company gives you non-CAR forms, do not give to your seller or buyer without telling them, this is not a CAR form. I'm not qualified, I'm not an attorney, and I cannot tell you what this means to you. So you need to review this with your own attorney, right? So be very careful when companies are sending you forms that are not CAR forms. You're not an attorney, so you cannot advise your client on whether or not to sign them. Same way with addendums, just a heads up, if you guys are making all these fun arrangements on an addendum, let me eyeball it and send it to Darren and let him eyeball it, because sometimes there's been some things agreed to that I'm not even sure we should be agreeing to, right? So, but I mean, everything's negotiable, but just make sure it's done properly, is what I'm saying. Okay, moving into Megan's Law database. There's the website, meganslaw.ca.gov. If somebody has a concern with that, please, that is not for you to go research for them. If they have a question, you give them the website and say, you can do your due diligence and make sure you're happy, okay? Moving on to notice regarding gas and hazardous liquid transmission pipelines, same thing. There is a website where your buyers can go to and get their information to see if this area is in a zone regarding gas and hazardous liquid transmission. Condo plan development. Of course, seller has 7 days to disclose if the property is a condo. that's gonna come in all the disclosures, the SPQ forms, they'll be able to fill that out, pardon, and that will come in the first 7 days. Okay, before I forget. Moving to the next page, ta-da, I remembered Rolanda. Okay, if the property is a condo or located in a planned development, seller has 3 days to request the HOA doc, okay? And that's gonna give them all the information about the HOA. Any private transfer fees are going to be noted on there, any pet restrictions. And you have to be careful because, you know, some of these gated communities, they'll have pet restrictions. You cannot have more than 2 pets. You cannot have more than 50 pounds. I mean, some of them have, they have their rules. So these HOA docs are important. If you're representing the seller, make sure you tell your seller when escrow opens, if you're in an HOA, escrow is gonna be asking you for money for the HOA. That cannot be taken out of the buyer's deposit. It has to be paid for separately by the seller, because that is the seller. Remember, it's statutory. There's not even a box for buyer or seller. This is only the seller. If they take it out of the buyer's deposit and should it not close for some reason, now the buyer can't get their money back. So they cannot legally take it out of the buyer's deposit. So the seller needs to deposit money. Normally what escrow does, at least with ours, they'll send them the link, they'll email a link to the seller saying, here's the link for you to go in and pay for the HOA docs. The seller will go in, order, you know, they just basically finalize the order because escrow has set everything up for them, pay it, and then they can pay it off of a credit card. And then once they're ordered, but it's on a time limit. So if you have the seller, make sure you're letting them know contractually, you've got 3 days to get this done. And then the buyer will get this, because the buyer, all that has to be delivered. Escrows, and this is another thing, you gotta be careful. And I just want you to play a heads up, and I know you probably will never remember this, but maybe there'll be a red flag if you hear HOA. You might have a buyer say, I'm an all-cash buyer, I want to close in 15 days, and it's in an HOA. You better call escrow and find out what the rush fee is, because HOAs typically, 7 to 10 days minimum to receive HOA docs. So if you open escrow and it takes, they're going to wait for a few days for the buyer to make his earnest money, and then you have to wait for seller to pay for the docs. That might be after close of escrow if the buyer wanted a 2-week escrow, right? So make sure you think about it. Oh, is there an HOA? Let me call escrow, see how fast we can get these docs before we put a close of escrow date on it. So you're putting the correct information. Okay.
So if you fill this out and the seller accepts your offer, and then, you go into escrow, and let's say, now you finally get the HOA form 15 days into escrow. If any of these things are in there, can you cancel the?
Yes.
Okay.
Because on the contingency removal that you're doing, there's a portion for HOA. So you might remove your inspection contingency, but you're not removing HOA contingency. Be very careful when you're removing your contingency. It's important you understand exactly what you're removing. But remember, if they get these on day 15, they have 5 days to review them. Because remember, we just read that paragraph in the contract. When any disclosure is sent to them, they have an additional 5 days to review. So that's got to be calculated into the equation as well. Okay?
And Gina, did you say that escrow could close prior to this being completed?
No,
No, right?
no. Did I say that?
No,
Oh.
I misunderstood.
Okay.
Well, no, because you said so escrow, I think you were just giving the example that this is gonna happen after escrow if you don't do the math right, or if you.
Oh, after the close of escrow date is scheduled, not
Oh.
after it actually closes.
Oh.
Sorry, my bad for wording it that way. Yeah, no, it's, the due date would be beyond our close of escrow date, so we would have to extend our escrow closing date.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what I'm at.
Thank you. Okay, condition of property. Unless otherwise agreed in writing, the property is sold as is in its present physical condition as of the date of acceptance, and the subject to buyer's investigation rights. The property, including pool, spa, landscaping, and grounds, is to be maintained in substantially the same condition is on the date of acceptance, and all debris and personal property not included in the sale shall be removed by close of escrow. So we tell our buyers, that's when we do the final walkthrough, that's what they're looking at. Is the property in at least the same or better condition if there were repairs made than it was on the date they first saw the property, okay? Sellers shall, within the time specified in 14A, disclose known material facts and defects affecting the property, including known insurance claims within the last 5 years, and make any and all other disclosures required by law. Buyer has the right to conduct buyer investigations of the property and is specified in 14B based upon information discovered in those investigations, cancel this agreement, or request that seller make repairs or take other action. Buyer is strongly advised, notice this in bold, buyer is strongly advised to conduct investigations of the entire property in order to determine its present condition. Seller may not be aware of all the defects affecting the property or other factors that buyer considers important. Property improvements may not be built according to code in compliance with current law or have had permits issued. So buyer, do your due diligence, do all your inspections. This is telling them to do that, okay? Buyer's investigation of property and matters affecting the property. So buyer's acceptance of the condition of and any other matter affecting the property is a contingency of the agreement as specified in this paragraph and 14B. Within the time specified, buyer shall have the right at buyer's expense, unless otherwise agreed to conduct inspections, investigations, test surveys, and other studies. Those are buyer investigations, including but not limited to a general inspection, general physical inspection, an inspection specifically for wood destroying pests and organisms. Any inspection for wood destroying pests and organisms should be prepared by a registered structural pest control company. Shall cover the main building and attached structures, may cover detached structures. Make sure if you have a detached structure and you're ordering the wood pest report, you tell them, I also want the detached structure looked at. Otherwise, you won't get that done. You'll only get the report on the main house. Shall not include water tests of shower pans on upper level units unless the owners of the property below the shower consent. So if you have a 2-story condo, your condo units above, they cannot do any water testing without the bottom downstairs neighbor saying, okay, because if it leaks, there is a problem, right? Shall not include roof coverings, and if the property is in a unit or condo or other common interest subdivision, the inspection shall include only the separate interest in any exclusive use areas being transferred and shall not include common areas. So they're not going to go and inspect like the common area pool or the dog park or any of the common. They're only inspecting the property. Okay. And separating into sections for evident infestation or infection. So section 1 works, and for conditions likely to lead to infestation or infection, section 2 works. So the section 1 work is there's active issues. Section 2 work is there's going to be an issue unless this gets, rectified. Okay. Inspect for lead-based paint and other lead-based paint hazards, and satisfy buyer as to any matter specified in the attached buyer inspection advisory. Review registered sex offender database, confirm the insurability of buyer and the property, including the availability and cost of flood and fire insurance, and review and seek approval of leases that may need to be assumed by the buyer. Without seller's prior written consent, buyer shall neither make nor cause to be made invasive or destructive buyer investigations, except for minimally invasive testing required to prepare a pest control report or inspections by any governmental building or zoning inspector. That's a big paragraph, right? So basically, they're going to do all their requirements. They can't do anything invasive to the property. There you have it. Sellers shall make the property available for all buyer investigations. Here we go. Okay, there we go. Thank you. seller shall make the property available for all buyer investigations. Buyer shall, as specified in 14B, complete buyer investigations and either remove the contingency or cancel the agreement. And give seller at no cost complete copies of all such investigation reports obtained by buyer, which obligation shall survive the termination of this agreement. Oh my gosh, I get this so much. So buyer's gonna do their inspections. They have to give these reports to the seller. Even if they cancel, they have to give these reports to the seller. And I get this, well, the buyer paid for it, it's the buyer's report. No, it's contractual, because now the seller has to disclose. You're canceling because you just got the some inspection. We want to know what's in that report. We have a right to know what's in that report, right? So if anybody gives you grief and says, or, you know, it says, I'm not giving you the report, refer them to paragraph 12C of the purchase contract. If your buyer says, no, I'm not giving the seller my report, refer your buyer to 12C of the purchase contract. Legally, they're required to. Okay? Buyer indemnity and seller protection for entry. So what happens if someone gets hurt on that property, right? Buyers shall keep the property free and clear of all liens. So while you're in escrow, don't go out and do anything crazy. Repair all damage arising from buyer investigations. Buyer shall remove any all damage. Indemnify and hold seller harmless from all resulting liability, claims, demands, damages, and costs. Buyer shall carry or buyer shall require anyone acting on buyer's behalf to carry policies of liability, workers' compensation, and other applicable insurance, defending and protecting seller from liability for any injuries to persons or property occurring during any buyer investigation or work done on property at buyer's direction prior to close of escrow. Seller is advised that certain protections may be afforded seller by recording a notice of non-responsibility for buyer investigations and work done on the property at buyer's direction. Buyer's obligations under this paragraph shall survive the termination of this agreement. So if something happens when the buyers are doing their inspections, buyers are obligated. Now, this is where hiring as a buyer's agent, hiring licensed people to do the work is critical. Because they are licensed, they are insured. You want to make sure of that. Bringing Uncle Joe down because I want to examine this, and the buyer says I want my uncle to do this because yeah, he knows all about this stuff. He's a great handyman. Is he insured? What happens if Uncle Joe slips and falls, or breaks his ankle, or something on the property? Uncle Joe's responsible for Uncle Joe because right here in the contract they're holding us harmless if we're doing any of those inspections. Okay, your seller shouldn't have to pay for that. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yes.
With regard to sharing of the reports, so the buyer is obligated to share the results of the inspections with the seller.
Mhm.
Let's say the deal falls out, doesn't happen for whatever reason, but the property goes back on the market, and then other buyers come in to make offers. Is the seller then obligated to share that information
Yes.
moving forward?
Yes. That's why they have to get the report, because they have to disclose all the other reports done on the property.
And at what point when you're doing that, because I ran into a scenario where it had fallen out because the seller determined that they didn't want to do all the work that came from the inspection.
Sure.
But I didn't find that out until after I was asking questions that the broker's assistant mentioned it to me. So at what point, is the listing agent required to share that or let you know, because it wasn't
Always.
listed in the M and the
It
MLS.
should be.
Should be.
It should be.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you only have to amend. The seller only amends the PDF if something happens in escrow that they're aware of. But if a buyer inspection report says this is an issue, they don't have to amend the CDS after that. But what I would do is I would upload that inspection report to the MLS on the listing agent.
Right.
And have it attached there so other buyers, you want to be open. You don't want to hide anything. You don't want to say, oh, well, don't tell them no other buyers will want it. They're going to find out because they're going to have their report and, then they're going to cancel. So let's be transparent. This is my house. This is what it's about. Buyer, do your inspections, check it out. You have a right to know what it's about. If you're okay with it, move forward. If you're not okay with it, please don't make an offer and tie up the property if you're not going to close. Right, so that's what you want to make sure you're doing.
Gina,
ma'am?
I have a question on the, making sure that Uncle Joe or whoever's doing the inspection is insured. Do we ask for proof of insurance?
If you just if you're representing the buyer, right? Just let them know the paragraph, or in the purchase agreement, paragraph, 12, what is it? 12, D. Just let them know that the person who's in the property needs to be licensed, insured, and and you can even read that paragraph or include that in an email saying, look, they are holding seller harmless should anything break or anybody get injured.
That's on you.
So whoever it is, if Uncle Joe's looking at it, make sure Uncle Joe is insured.
Okay.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's on you, the buyer. Could
Well,
that come back on me?
lawsuit, you know that.
Pardon?
It'll be a lawsuit, you know that.
Right. Does it ever come back on the agent?
Yep, yes, always.
All right.
You're liable, you're always named, and then our attorneys have to weed everything out. But
Oh my
what
goodness.
you can do to avoid this is to make sure you said, if your buyer says, I want my Uncle Joe to do this, and you say, okay, I need to bring something to your attention. I want to look at paragraph 12D of the purchase agreement, right? Or you might copy and paste that into an email for them. And you say, I want you to understand that you are liable for this. So if there is an issue in the future, you are liable for this. They can't come back and say, well, you never told me, right? So our attorney now can defend you and could most likely get you dismissed by you proving, here's the email I sent, here's, I did my conversation, here's the text I told the buyer, you need to make sure you did everything you could to make everybody aware of the circumstance.
So document.
Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha.
Document.
Gotcha.
Okay, title investing, and we're gonna get through this pretty, hopefully very soon now, because the last 3 pages are a lot of terms, but let's go to title investing. The next couple pages are still really important. You guys need a break? You need to stand up, go to the restroom or anything? Okay. Okay. Machine. All right. Within the time specified in 14, so paragraph 14 is coming is an important paragraph, right? Buyer shall be provided a current preliminary title report. The preliminary report is only an offer by the title insured to issue a policy of title insurance and may not contain every item affecting title. So you're going to get a prelim. When you get it from escrow, you want to make sure the escrow normally sends it directly to your buyer and they're going to send it to you. Read the prelim to see what's on there. Sometimes you're going to find child support liens. Sometimes you're going to find tax liens. You're going to find some, you never know what you're going to find popped up onto these prelims. Sometimes these things are on here because, and I'm sure you've heard this before, statement of information. Whether you represent the buyer or the seller, you want to make sure that buyer or seller get their statement of information completed into escrow as soon as possible. It comes with the escrow opening package, but you can get one off our Landwood website very quickly as well. And it's a 1 sheet of paper, the statement of information, and basically it asks your client for their names for the last 10 years, their addresses for the last 10 years, their jobs for the last 10 years. And the reason is that's what escrow and title use to make sure you are the right Joe Smith. You can imagine there's probably more than one Joe Smith in the world, right? So that child support lien that's on this thing, it actually happened on one of my transactions where there was a tax lien, and I called the seller and he says, well, that's interesting, I have no children. A child support lien. He says, I have no children. I'm thinking, are you sure? Are you sure? But it wasn't him, and it was just his statement of information wasn't in, and it was a different person, not him, and they were able to clear that up. So take a peek at that. Make sure your clients have done their statement of information because that will clarify any issues.
Sometimes it means stay on there if you're not recorded properly.
Yeah, that's another ball. that's another hurdle. I always say escrow is really funny. It's remember running track. I never ran track, but I watched it. But when you ran track, those hurdles, that's escrow. Escrow's got lots of hurdles, and your job is to take your client by the hand and help them over these hurdles without falling on your face too many times. So that's escrow. They're gonna look at the prelim, they're gonna, and then seller shall within 7 days give escrow holder a completed statement of information. So that should clear up anything. Title is taken in its present condition, subject to all encumbrances, easements, covenants, conditions, restrictions, etc. Except for monetary liens of record, which seller is obligated to pay off, unless buyer is assuming those obligations or taking the property subject to those obligations and those matters which seller has agreed to remove in writing. So depending on who your buyer is in the property, okay, let's think short sale. Not that there's any going on right now, but many times there's a property tax lien. They haven't paid their mortgage. They haven't paid their taxes, right? So now we have the payoff balance for the lender, and we've got these tax liens sitting here. And seller has no money. They're saying, I'm not paying these. I have no money. The buyer can pay those, but the buyer has to agree to pay them. Buyer may say, heck no, I'm not paying these. I'm out of here. I'll buy another house. But just it depends on the market, and it depends on the circumstances. If the buyer is getting this house at way below market value, he might say, yeah, I'll kick out a couple grand for these liens, or whatever. It just depends. But no, that could come up. Of course, seller has a duty to disclose to buyer all matters known to seller affecting title, whether of record or not. You got to have clear title, and I know that's a title class. When Melissa has these title classes, you want to come to them, especially when it comes to the prelim property profile. There's a lot of information in there that's going to help you explain things to your client and what it means. But there could be a cloud on title. Remember, a deed just has to be delivered. It doesn't have to be recorded to be valid, right? So let's say I own a house, and I just love Eileen so much. I'm going to give you a portion of interest of my house, right? So I'm going to sign a deed, and I'm going to deliver it to Eileen. She has now got a legal interest in my house, even if she never records it, right? So now I decide I want to sell this place. I'm sick of it. I'm moving out. I'm going to the beach, right? And I sell my house, and Eileen steps up and goes, wait a minute. She is a cloud on my title. I need to get that resolved. And sometimes, now mind you, sometimes these people are in a whole different country, right? And so it can take time, and when these clouds come up, they have to be resolved. And so the whole title process is truly interesting, and I do encourage you to go through some title classes and understand, so when these things come up, it's not like, oh my gosh, this guy's falling. Now what? Now you know, okay, here's the steps we need to take, and you'll be able to take care of it. Okay. Close of escrow, buyer shall receive a grant deed conveying title, or for stock cooperative or long-term lease, and assignment of stock certificate, or if seller's leasehold interest, including oil, mineral, water rights, is currently owned by seller. Title shall vest as designated in buyer's supplemental escrow instructions. The manner of taking title may have significant legal and tax consequences. Consult an appropriate professional. So your buyer's going to say, how should I take title? What is your answer? No, escrow is going to say, I'm not an attorney. You're going to say, you check with your attorney. In the buyer and seller guide, there is a common ways of taking title that you can give to the buyer and say, here, I can give you this. You can read the differences and see which works best. But if they need more clarification, they're going to have to consult an attorney, because that's considered giving legal advice. And just know, if you want to be a good person, they're my friends, I want to tell them what to do, you could potentially be sued for practicing law without a license. So be very careful. Don't take it lightly. Just say, I'm really sorry. I'd love to help you, but I'm not an attorney and I can't give legal advice. I can give you this. You can look at it, but if you have further questions, please chat with your attorney. And that's how I would handle it. Okay. Buyer shall receive a CLTA, also homeowner's policy title insurance, if applicable to the type of property and buyer. If not, escrow holder shall notify the buyer. And so that's just transferring title. Moving to paragraph 14, time periods, removal of contingencies, and cancellation rights. guys are the best. Keep me on my toes here. Okay, so time periods. The following time periods may only be extended, altered, modified, or changed by mutual written agreement. Any removal of contingencies or cancellation under this paragraph by either buyer or seller must be exercised in good faith and in writing. And they are showing CR from CR, which is contingency removal, or CC, which is cancellation of contract. So A, seller has 7 days after acceptance to deliver all seller disclosures, okay? If by the time specified seller has not delivered any such item, buyer, after first delivering to seller a notice to seller to perform, may cancel this agreement. So 7 days happens, we don't get disclosures, we do a notice to seller to perform, we still don't get the disclosures, we look at the buyer and say, you were entitled to these within 7 days, what do you want to do? Most likely the buyer will say, well, find out what's going on, and, you know, the seller's been out of stage, they're getting them done, whatever, we'll give them a few more days, great. But, you know, maybe the seller's saying, I'm not doing them. I don't know. Then the buyer has a right to cancel, okay? 14B, buyer has 17 days to complete all investigations, review disclosures, reports, lease documents to be assumed by buyer pursuant to paragraph 8, and other applicable information which buyer receives from seller, and approve all matters affecting the property, and deliver to seller signed copies of statutory and lead disclosures and other disclosures delivered by seller in accordance with 10A. So yes, the seller's going to do the disclosures. Yes, the buyer has to sign them and return them for the contract. Within the time specified in 14B1, buyer may request seller make repairs or take any other action regarding the property. CAR form RR. Isn't it great that they give you the name of the form so you know exactly what to do? Seller has no obligation to agree to or respond to buyer's request. Okay, so the seller can just ignore it. There's no timetable. They can just say, I'm not doing anything, I'm ignoring this. Or they can say, all right, I'll do something, or I'll do this, but not that, or I'm going to give you some money. But this is a negotiation point at this point. By the end of the time specified in 14B, buyer shall deliver to seller a removal of the applicable contingency or cancellation of this agreement. However, if any report, disclosure, or information for which seller is responsible is not delivered within the time specified in 14A, then buyer has 5 days after delivery of such item or the time specified in 14B1, whichever is later, to deliver to seller a removal of the applicable contingency or cancellation. So that's, again, we need to get all the disclosures from the seller. If not, we have that additional 5 days. Here's where we get a little gray area. A continuation of contingency. Even after the end of the time specified in paragraph 14 and before seller cancels, if at all, pursuant to paragraph 14B, buyer retains the right in writing to either remove remaining contingencies or cancel this agreement based on a remaining contingency. Once buyer's written removal of all contingencies is delivered to seller, seller may not cancel this agreement. Okay. So again, seller has no contingencies to cancel this agreement unless it's contingent upon the seller finding replacement property. If you are a listing agent, that is a hugely important question to ask your sellers right now. Do you need to find replacement property when we're in escrow, right? Because if so, we have to make it contingent because the limited amount of inventory, there's not a lot, right? So what happens when we're in escrow, and I'm seeing this, I've seen it a lot, where the sellers start panicking because, oh my gosh, I haven't found a place to move yet. And the first question out of my mouth is, did you do a seller purchase of replacement property contingency? What's that? Yeah, exactly. So you need to, that's an important question. If the seller says, yes, let's do that, it better protect them. We can always remove that contingency, right? If they find a place, great, we can remove it quickly. But if not, now you're not in a bad situation with the seller who's trying to do everything they can to get out of this agreement when they really have no legal right to do so. So make sure you ask that question if you're the listing agent. Okay, access to property. A lot of people, a lot of agents miss this. Buyers shall have access to the property to conduct inspections, investigations for 17 days after acceptance, whether or not any part of the buyer's investigation contingency has been waived or removed. So they're doing their inspections. Day 18 rolls around, they call you and say, okay, we're gonna do this other inspection. You, the seller, is totally within the right to say, absolutely not, you're done. You're done. You had 17 days for the contract. If they want it, if the seller wants to extend that, they can, but really think about why the buyer didn't get it completed first. Are they just trying to find stuff? Or are they truly still trying to complete due diligence? So again, it's a case by case basis, but really they have 17 days, day 18, you can remove that lockbox, take it off, lock it up, and nobody gets into that house until VP, verification of property. Okay? Okay, removal of contingencies with offer. There are some buyers that will do this. I never recommend it. Buyer removes the contingency specified in the attached contingency removal. If buyer removes any contingency without adequate understanding on the property's condition or buyer's ability to purchase, buyer is acting against the advice of broker. So, you know, if they say, no, I'm not making, and the buyers will say this because they don't understand what it means. And this just happened in our office recently. Buyer says, I want to make an all cash 10-day offer, no contingency, right? But, and then in the next sentence, he says, I'll have my home inspector go out and look at the property, like right after we open escrow. Okay, and that's fine, but you understand, that's a contingency. No, it's not. But yes, it is. It's a contingency. And if you have that home inspection report and the house is falling apart, what are you gonna do? Well, can I cancel? You will, but you'll lose your deposit because you are removing all your contingencies. So make sure you are explaining everything to the buyer. And I'm telling you, this was an investor buyer who bought and sold properties every day of the week. And this was coming out of that person's mouth. So I'm sure the other agents who may have represented them in the past just removed them and they just did their things. I don't know. I can't answer for that, but it's very dangerous if you do that. So it's always acting against the advice of broker, and if they insist, we do have a release to protect. Okay, seller right to cancel. So seller right to cancel. Lift this here. Buyer contingencies. If by the time specified in the agreement, buyer has not delivered to seller a removal of applicable contingency or cancellation, then seller, after first delivering a notice to buyer to perform, may cancel the agreement. In such event, seller shall authorize the return of buyer's deposit except for fees incurred by the buyer. So buyer has not removed their contingencies. Let's say it's day 20 and the seller's asking for inspection contingency removal, right? An appraisal contingency removal if applicable. And the buyer doesn't do it. The seller now can, this is how a seller can legally cancel. If you have a seller who wants to legally cancel, but there's no STRP contingency for the seller, then you have to adhere to those timelines like clockwork. And a notice to perform, you're allowed to send it out no sooner than 2 days prior to the due date. So like if they say, I'm gonna cancel this, and you explain that you can't, you have no contingencies to do that. But on day 15, we can send a notice to buyer to perform to remove all their contingencies by day 17. You don't have to wait till day 17 to do it, right? And then if buyer doesn't, seller can cancel legally on day 18. Okay, so those are important things to remember.
Is there a timeline after notice to perform, like 48 hours?
Yes, it's right in the paperwork. It's 2 days.
2 days.
Yeah, unless you change it in the contract. So if you are representing a buyer, for example, and you think that the buyer's gonna have a hard time performing, now, if you change it to like 5 days, that's gonna raise a red flag. If I'm a listing agent, I'm gonna say, what the heck is this? I'm gonna counter that bad boy out really quick, right? But unless you change it in the contract, it's 2 days. Okay. Seller, after first delivering buyer a notice to perform, may cancel the agreement if buyer does not take the following action. deposit funds is required in 3A. Deliver a notice of FHA or VA costs or terms required by paragraph 3, that's the FVA. Deliver a letter is required, that's, proof of funds and all that good stuff. In writing, assume or accept leases or liens. So all these things that the buyer says that we're going to do this contingent, they're going to release those. And if they don't release those, then the seller can do a notice to perform. Okay. The notice to perform shall be in writing, shall be signed by the applicable buyer or seller, and give the other party at least 2 days after delivery for the other party to remove the contingency or cancel the agreement. So the effective buyer's removal of contingencies, if buyer removes in writing any contingency or cancellation rights unless otherwise specified in writing, buyer shall conclusively deem to have completed all buyer investigations and review of reports and other applicable information and disclosures pertaining to that contingency or cancellation right, elected to proceed with the transaction and assumed all liability, responsibility, and expense for repairs or corrections pertaining to that contingency or cancellation right, or for the inability to obtain financing. Close of escrow. Before buyer or seller may cancel this agreement for failure of the other party to close escrow pursuant to this agreement, buyer or seller must first deliver to the other party a demand to close escrow. The demand to close escrow shall be signed by the applicable buyer or seller. Give the other party at least 3 days after delivery to close escrow. Demand to close may not be delivered any earlier than 3 days prior to the scheduled close of escrow. So let's say all contingencies are removed, everything is done, we're waiting to close, but the buyer, for whatever reason, or the seller, for whatever reason, they're dragging their feet, and there's a reason why they're not closing. Red flag, but it happens. You have to send, you don't do a notice to perform because they've already done all that. You have to do a demand to close escrow. And then that comes with other issues as well. There could be, if they don't close, there could be a lawsuit for specific performance, forcing the other party to perform on the contract. Okay. Effective cancellation of deposits. If buyer or seller gives written notice of cancellation pursuant to the rights exercised under the agreement, the parties agree to sign mutual instructions to cancel the sale and escrow and release deposits, if any, to the party entitled to the funds, less fees and costs incurred by that party. Fees and costs may be payable to service providers and vendors for services and products provided during escrow. Except as specified below, release of funds will require mutual signed release instructions from the parties, judicial decision, or arbitration award. If either party fails to execute mutual instructions to cancel escrow, one party may make a written demand to escrow holder for the deposit. There we go. Bring that up for you guys. However, let's see, escrow holder upon receipt shall promptly deliver notice of the demand to the other party. If within 10 days after escrow holder's notice, the other party does not object to the demand, escrow holder shall disperse the deposit to the party making the demand. If escrow holder complies with the proceeding process, escrow holder, each party shall be deemed to have released escrow holder from any and all claims or liability related to the dispersal of the deposit. Escrow holder at its discretion may nonetheless require mutual cancellation instructions. A party may be subject to civil penalty of up to $1,000 for refusal to sign cancellation instructions if no good faith dispute exists and as to who is entitled to the deposited funds. So this paragraph is a little squirrely because what it says is your buyer wants to cancel. Buyer has not removed contingency, right? So they want to cancel the agreement. The seller, because of this form, the cancellation of contract is in 2 parts. The first part is this party is canceled and only one party has to cancel. So one party signs. The bottom portion is the release of deposit. Both buyer and seller have to sign that form. They both have to agree to it. What this says is, let's say you send it to the seller and say, my buyer is canceling, please sign the release of deposit portion so I can send it to escrow. And they say, no, we're not signing that portion, right? Even if you did the form that says so in here, the buyer demand a release deposit, there's not an escrow company that I know about here that will release a deposit without mutual release a judicial arbitration or some other form of instruction. Because they don't want the liability. So that money is gonna sit in there until they either have two signatures on the release of deposit, or they're gonna have an arbitration award or a court order. Okay, so that regardless. But again, remember, if somebody's just being a jerk and not wanting to release because they're mad, they could be liable up to $1,000 for damages for doing that. Okay? Hi, Mark. Still here. The purchase contract. Okay, so final verification. So buyers shall have the right, let me go down another page. We're almost there, kids. Buyers shall have the right to make a final verification of the property within 5 days prior to close of escrow, not as a contingency of the sale, but solely to confirm the property is maintained pursuant to paragraph 11. Repairs have been completed as agreed. Seller has complied with seller's obligations under this agreement. So within 5 days of closing, you're gonna take your buyer and you're gonna walk through the property. Repairs shall be completed prior to final verification of condition unless otherwise agreed in writing. Repairs to be performed at seller's expense may be performed by seller or through others, provided that the work complies with applicable law, including governmental permit, inspection, and approval requirements. Repairs shall be performed in a good, skillful manner with materials of quality and appearance comparable to existing materials. It is understood that exact restoration of appearance and cosmetic items following all repairs may not be possible. Sellers shall obtain invoices and paid receipts for repairs performed by others, prepare a written statement indicating the repairs performed by seller and the date of such repairs, and provide copies of invoices and paid receipts and statements to buyer prior to the final verification of condition. So before your final walkthrough, you're gonna contact that listing agent, make sure you have copies of all the receipts and everything that you're entitled to, so you can take those now to your walkthrough and make sure, did this work get done? Did this work get done? Okay? Proration of property taxes and other items, just know, everything is prorated in escrow, okay? So when it comes, if it's closing on a certain date, seller's gonna pay up to the date of closing, and then it's gonna be prorated from the date of closing upon, okay? Broker's compensation, I love this job because we get paid at close of escrow. We get paid at close of escrow. And so when you're gonna open escrow, they're gonna send some commission instructions that the manager needs to sign. We're gonna sign them, send them back to you. You're gonna send them to escrow, and that's our authorization saying, yes, this amount is correct for our commission. Scope of duty, buyer and seller acknowledge and agree the broker does not decide what price buyer should pay or seller should accept. Does not guarantee the condition of the property, does not guarantee the performance, adequacy, completeness of inspection, services, products, or repairs provided or made by seller or others, does not have an obligation to conduct an inspection of common areas or areas off the side of the property, shall not be responsible for identifying defects on the property in common areas or off-site unless such defects are visually observable by an inspection of reasonably accessible areas of the property or are known to brokers, shall not be responsible for inspecting public records or permits concerning the title or use of property, shall not be responsible for identifying the location of boundary lines or other items affecting title, shall not be responsible for verifying square footage, representations, or others, or information contained in investigation reports, MLS, advertisement flyers, or other promotional material, shall not be responsible for determining the fair market value of the property or any personal property included in the sale. It's not up to us to decide all this stuff. Shall not be responsible for providing legal or tax advice, et cetera, shall not be responsible for providing other advice or information that exceeds the knowledge, education, and experience required to perform real estate license activity. Buyer and seller agree to seek legal, tax, insurance, title, and other desired assistance from the appropriate professional. So that gives you the out, okay? When they say, what did I hire you for? What did I hire you for? That was scope of duty. You're hired to facilitate the transaction. That's what you're hired to do. right? Representative capacity, so if somebody is signing, just understand, if you're an individual, you're signing as yourself. If you're signing on behalf of someone, such as a power of attorney, a trustee, a corporation, an LLC, if you're signing for anyone other than your personal self, you're signing in a representative capacity. You are representing someone or some other entity, okay? So if that's the case, you need to include the representative capacity signature disclosure, okay? And that needs to be done immediately with the offer if you're representing the buyer, and then the seller will counter with the RCSD for the seller if they're also signing in a representative capacity. Paragraph 20, joint escrow instructions. Just know this purchase contract, these are the escrow instructions. So when escrow gets open, you're going to see supplemental escrow instructions coming to you. And don't get confused and think, well, why is that? Because this document is titled California Residential Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instructions. So what escrow is going to do is they're going to go through this contract. They're going to take all the dates and the timetables and everything from this contract and the agreement, who's paying for what, and then they're going to add their general provisions to it as a supplemental escrow instruction. And then they're going to send them out for signatures by everyone. Okay, so when those escrow instructions get signed, that means everything in the contract is now ratified and everybody's agreeing to everything. Okay. Moving on to paragraph 21, remedies for buyer's breach of contract. This is liquidated damages portion. So let's go. Any clause added by the parties specifying a remedy such as a release or forfeiture of deposit or making a deposit non-refundable. Thank you. For failure of buyer to complete the purchase in violation of this agreement shall be deemed invalid unless the clause independently satisfies the statutory liquidated damage requirements set forth in the civil code. So sometimes agents like to get creative and right at the get-go say, we're going to make deposit non-refundable. You know, if the buyer and seller agree to that, and then something happens and the escrow does not close and it gets canceled, the buyer can get back their deposit. Do you know why? Because this paragraph makes it invalid. And if it's invalid, it means it does not apply. Okay? So a lot of agents will try to do this, but if you're representing the seller, you need to understand, dude, you can't do this. They can still come after you later and get their deposit back because it says right in the contract, such as release or forfeiture of deposit or making a deposit non-refundable is in violation of this agreement. So you cannot do that. Goodbye, sir.
The 21?
21A. Okay, so liquidated damages now, if buyer fails to complete this purchase because of buyer's default, seller shall retain as liquidated damages the deposit actually paid. If the property is a dwelling with no more than 4 units, one of which buyer intends to occupy, remember that's why it was important you check the box if they're going to occupy the property earlier in the contract, then the amount retained shall be no more than 3% of the purchase price, which is why we always counter for 3%. Any excess shall be returned to the buyer, except as provided in paragraph 14H. Release of the funds will require mutual assigned release instructions from both buyer and seller, judicial decision or reward. At the time of any increased deposit, buyer and seller shall sign a separate liquidated damage provision incorporating the increased deposit as liquidated damages. So remember, if you did an initial deposit and then you did a increased deposit later, you need to do this form RID, receipt for increased deposit, because that too will attach the liquidated damages then. Okay. 22, dispute. This is just mediation and arbitration. And to put it in layman's terms, if buyer and seller are in a dispute, okay, everything will start at mediation. All right, automatically it goes to mediation. And if they cannot, and the reason everybody's going to demand mediation is because, let's say you demand mediation, it does not get resolved and it goes to arbitration, the prevailing party shall receive their attorney's fees as long as you demanded our mediation. All right, but if mediation is not demanded, then you need to pay your own attorney's fee. So no matter what, if there's ever a dispute, we make sure mediation is always demanded. Okay, even if it's scheduled, we're gonna demand mediation because we're gonna go in and get our attorney's fees when we win, because we cross our T's and dot our I's. Absolutely. Arbitration, now your clients may not want to initial this. Some do, some don't. But you can't tell them what to do and you can't make them initial it, okay? So what this means is if it's not resolved at mediation, and the mediation, remember, is it could be an attorney, a judge, a retired attorney, or a professional mediator. And they're gonna basically have buyers here, seller in this room, and they're gonna run back and forth, trying to get them to come to a common ground. Okay, that's mediation. And if they can do it, then they, resolved it and life goes on and happy. If they can't, and they've elected arbitration, that's like a trial. It's just a judge, or it could be a judge, a retired judge, an attorney, a retired attorney, or a professional arbitrator, except there is no going back and forth. Buyer is presenting his case, seller is presenting his case, and the arbitrator will make a decision, and that arbitrator's decision is binding, okay? So they waive their right to a court trial. So some people will say, I'm not signing this, I want a court trial. And some people will say, oh yeah, I want arbitration. It used to be everybody wanted arbitration because they thought it to be faster and cheaper. But in today's world, we know of at least one arbitration that was in the six figures for attorney fees, because there was so much involved. So, let your clients know. If they say, what should I do? I cannot give you that advice. That's legal advice. So you just tell them, what do you want to do? Okay. All right. Let's go down.
So, just very quick, can I tell them what, like you said, arbitration? So,
Right.
Okay, I always get confused here, just very quick.
Sure.
So, when we explain in arbitration, when we said if they don't want to go to court, is that what it is?
Well, arbitration, just normally you can get a court date quicker
Okay.
because the court system is so backed up, especially now after COVID. It's insane how backed up it is, right? But, and you can get a hearing date usually quicker on an arbitration. The difference is the arbitrator's decision is final. You don't appeal it. It's binding. So whatever that arbitrator decides, that's it. That's the answer. Win or lose, that's the answer. If you don't do arbitration, then you can file in court in front of a jury and go through the whole process. It could take 5 years to get your case heard. But some people say, I don't care, I'd rather go to a court trial than arbitration. Some people say, I don't want to be anywhere near a court, it's only arbitration. So just whatever your client wants to do, you have to.
And then at this point, but it's still the buyer and seller, they're still gonna go present their.
Yes, either way, they're presenting their case.
Their case.
They're either gonna present it to an arbitrator, or they're gonna present it to a judge and potentially a jury.
Okay, but it is not to court.
If they initial this, there's no court.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, if they don't initial it, then they have the right to file a lawsuit in the court.
Okay.
Okay? You're very welcome.
If they don't sign it, can they still seek arbitration?
If both parties agree. Both parties have to agree. That's why most agents want this done at the outset, so there's no fighting. You're already, believe me, this is the honeymoon phase of the relationship. So everybody's warm and fuzzy at the beginning. Sure, let's get along. We'll work it out, no problem. And then you get through the repairs, and all of a sudden the dragons come out, and they get into these disputes, and you try negotiating when they hate each other. It's darn near impossible. So that's why, as much as we can get negotiated up front, the better.
Plus it has to be accepted by the seller.
Right, now, let's say buyer initials this, we send it to the seller doesn't initial it, and he does not address it in the counter. You need to be aware of that. You need to cross your T's and dot your I's there, because if your client initialed arbitration and we get the contract back, which is another reason so many agents will send just the counter and say, well, I'm not gonna have my client sign everything. How do we know if they signed this or not? Right? We need the fully signed contract back, subject to the counter, but we need it all back so we can make sure there's no changes. Did they initial everything they were supposed to initial? Because because it says right in bold on the top of the counter that things initialed in the contract, but not countered, are not included in the contract. So if your buyer initialed the arbitration clause, seller does not address it in a counteroffer, but does not initial it here, then you do not have arbitration. So you need to let your buyer know, hey, is this important to you? They didn't sign arbitration and they didn't address it in the counter, because if it's important to the buyer, that needs to be countered again. And it could be just a matter of, did your seller mean to not sign this? Oh, no, they wanted to, they just forgot, right? You want to make sure you send me the correct copy, right, before you present it to the buyer, because that happens too.
And if they don't agree, let's say the seller doesn't want.
Then you need to tell your buyer, the seller does not agree. Buyer, how do you want to proceed? You can counter back, say, no, buyer is demanding it, and if not, it's a deal breaker. Or the buyer can say, I don't care, let's move on.
Okay.
So it's just what the buyer wants at that point.
Okay.
Okay,
So when you're going through this part with your client, I mean, you just explain what it all means. You
Correct.
can't advise them
Correct.
whether to sign or not sign.
exactly.
Even though we're trained in the.
Yeah, but we can't make their legal decisions.
Right.
And this is a legal decision. Do you want to go to arbitration or do you go to trial?
And
Okay,
it's worth noting, I think, that the vast majority of legal arrangements, I mean, everything, employment contracts, prefer that this is what they denote as arbitration, or for the reasons you mentioned, it can take forever, court costs, everything escalates above after arbitration. Players, professional players, they all have this clause.
well, you can't even go to a doctor's office without signing the arbitration. Then, no, if you're gonna be treated by me, you're gonna sign this or I'm not gonna treat you. So, I mean, it's, and that's a good point. In many places, you sign it or you're out of here, right?
Yeah.
But I would be careful to say it's quicker and cheaper, because
No.
sometimes it's not, depending on the case.
Yeah.
Okay, selection of service providers basically is saying, look, we're not guaranteeing anybody else's performance. Buyers-
Gina, before you go ahead, for 22C, the initials, I understand the ones above it, but how about the ones below it?
Oh, these are the initials at the bottom of every page, Les.
Oh, got it.
Those are
Sorry.
just the ones saying they read the page.
Oh, got it.
Good catch, though. You're so like that. So
I thought, oh my God, what does that mean? Okay,
Okay.
stupid.
All right, so, selection of service providers, buyer and seller may select any providers. You know, we're gonna recommend who we like and who we think is gonna do a good job, but ultimately it's buyer and seller decision. MLS, this just authorizes us to report it as a pending sale and upon closing, making it marked as closed. And it's gonna be published out there. Attorney's fees, in any action, proceeding, or arbitration between buyer and seller arising out of this agreement, the prevailing buyer or seller shall be entitled to reasonable attorney's fees and costs from the non-prevailing buyer or seller. Assignment, this happens frequently. Buyers shall not assign all or any part of buyer's interest in this agreement without first having obtained the separate written consent of seller to a specified assignee. Such consent shall not be unreasonably withheld. Any total or partial assignment shall not relieve buyer of buyer's obligations pursuant to this agreement unless otherwise agreed in writing by seller. And that's the CAR form AOAA, that's assignment of additional, it's assignment of an additional person addendum is what that is. It frequently happens where a buyer will make an offer on a property and then decide to add a spouse who didn't get on there first. Or my brother wants to go on this with me, or whatever, there might be another person. Sometimes investors will ask you to write an offer in their name or assignee. That's never a good thing. They need the name of the person. If they're gonna assign it, then we can address that later, and the seller shouldn't withhold for no really good reason. It's okay. It's just if you have a buyer who's bringing in another party, just make sure that other party is signing all the disclosures and gets all the inspection and reports as well, okay? Equal housing, yes, we follow all the anti-discrimination laws. Terms and conditions, this offer is made on the above terms and conditions. The liquidated damage paragraph or arbitration of disputes is incorporated if initial by all parties or if incorporated by mutual agreement in a counter or addendum. If at least one but not all parties initial a counter offer is required until agreement is reached. So we've already discussed that. Time is of the essence. Just know there's time limits on this. You guys, thank you, thank you, thank you. Here we go. There we go. Time is of the essence. Neither this agreement or any provision in it may be extended, amended, modified, altered, or changed except in writing by buyer and seller. So anytime, if now we need to change the closing date, you're going to do an extension of time addendum. You need to, address, maybe we can't get loan approval in 21 days. You're going to call up the seller or the listing broker and say, hey, can I get a whatever number of days extension for my contingency removal? So you need to do these in writing. Definitions, of course, the definitions are just a couple I want to point out. Acceptance is always day zero. Okay, just know that because I get a lot of those questions. When does the time period start? And let's say I did an offer and the buyer countered or the seller countered, and I get it today, and today is the day we're signing off fully accepted and we initial confirmation of acceptance. Today is day zero and all time periods start tomorrow. That is day one. Okay. Days means calendar days. And I've heard this frequently from agents. Oh, weekends don't count, right? Yes, they do count. But days means calendar days. However, after acceptance, the last day for performance of any act required by this agreement, including close of escrow, shall not include any Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, and instead shall be the next day. So if you buyer doesn't do something or seller doesn't do something, and we do a notice to perform, the notice to perform is sent out on a Thursday, and performance day is that Saturday. Technically, that buyer has until Monday, or if Monday's a holiday, they'll have until Tuesday to do that performing act, okay? Okay, and expiration of offer. At the very beginning, I said you need to have your name on this line. That gives you the authority to receive an offer on your buyer's behalf, so it's back delivered to you, and now you can sign off on a confirmation of acceptance. If you don't, then you have to make sure it's delivered to the buyer and the buyer has received it before you have an acceptance. Okay, so put your name in there, who's authorized to receive it by 5 p.m. on the third day after this offer is signed. Or you can change that. If I'm representing a buyer, I usually only give 24 hours, right? Of course, in this market, they're going to tell you all offers are going to be looked at on Monday at this time, and just talk to your buyer about that. Okay, if the buyer is signing in a representative capacity, you're going to make sure the initial's there. Acceptance of offer, this is where the seller's either going to check that they're countering or they're just going to sign off. And again, if they're signing in a representative capacity, they're going to check that box as well. There we go. And then if there's no counter, you as a buyer's agent made the offer. The seller signs it and sends it back, just as is. It was a perfect offer, there's no counter. Then you're going to initial right here where it says confirmation of acceptance. And this is the date you have a ratified contract. You will not initial this if there's a counter, because instead you're going to take the counter and give it to the buyer. Buyer's going to decide, do I want to accept or counter? If the buyer wants to accept it, then the seller will do the confirmation of acceptance when we give that back to them. It's the other person, whoever sends it, you're going to agree to it and then send it back to me and I'll confirm. Okay. And then the box where it says real estate brokers, this is confirming what you're getting paid. All right. So whatever is said in the MLS, that's your contract that you're getting paid for. If it's not in the MLS, you need to make sure you've done a CBC, a cooperating broker compensation form, to get paid. Or maybe you're doing, I don't know, for sale by owner or something, and they're doing a commission agreement. You need to make sure your commission is intact before you write the offer. After you write the offer, the horse is already out of the barn. So you need to make sure you're protecting yourself there. And that's it. Escrow holder will acknowledge. Sellers will present the offer, or they're just going to reject it by initialing there. And that, my friends, is the purchase agreement. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Now you're all masters of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, can you start over? I forgot this.
Page one.
Let me stop sharing here. See who's still awake.
Thank you, Gina. It was great.
Ah, you're very welcome. I'm glad you guys could join us. Let me stop the recording here. Done.
Thank you, Gina.
You're